A young man stood in thick smoke, surrounded by a completely devastated city. He was surrounded by the ruins of a perfectly normal life. There was absolutely no sign of life anywhere. Then, through the heavy dust, two glowing lights appeared. They looked like eyes. Could there finally be another living soul out there? Before long, it became terrifyingly clear that this was no ordinary person standing before him. A massive, powerful figure stood there, calling for the young man to come closer. The strange man with a demonic gaze promised he would wait for the boy at the very edge of the abyss. And then Sora woke up in his bed, drenched in sweat. Had he really had that nightmare again? He rolled over. Maybe he could sleep just a tiny bit longer. No chance. His parents were already shouting for him to wake up. They were running late. Even as he splashed water on his face in front of the mirror, the dream lingered. Sora felt a strange sensation, as if he somehow knew the ominous man from his nightmare. There was just something incredibly familiar about him. Right then, his father stepped out of the bathroom. He decided to brush off those silly thoughts and focus on his usual morning routine. His father affectionately ruffled his hair, teasing him for oversleeping again. Sora grumbled, feeling like his dad still treated him like a helpless little kid. After all, he was already 15. His dad kept insisting that he needed to play sports to grow strong. But honestly, if they weren't crammed into such a tiny, crowded apartment, things would be easier. They wouldn't even have to share a single shower. His father promised that once he got rich, Sora and his big brother Ricky would finally get their own separate rooms. He had been making those same promises for years, but his dad insisted things were changing. Life was simpler now because Ricky was practically independent, having already joined the military. He had been serving for 3 years now, and Sora planned to enlist too. However, the 15-year-old wasn't quite ready to say goodbye to his comfortable home life. He loved his warm family, especially his slightly clumsy dad who always cracked jokes. His mother was quite strict compared to his dad, but she was incredibly loving. In truth, they were an incredibly wonderful family where everyone felt genuinely happy. Sora secretly wished these peaceful days would last forever, but life had other plans. Without warning, a massive earthquake struck, shaking the entire apartment violently. Sora always had a quiet feeling that this peaceful life would end eventually. But he never could have imagined it would happen this fast or this catastrophically. Staring out the window in absolute shock, his eyes locked onto a colossal tower. It had materialized right in the center of the city during the quake. Soon, he spotted military jets. Fighter jets circled the tower, but no one realized humanity's countdown had just started 34. These towers were about to completely rewrite human history, and Sora felt it instantly. He knew these strange spires were connected to his nightmares, and now his dreams were becoming reality. In a panic, his parents quickly contacted their eldest son, Ricky. Ricky tried his best to reassure them, explaining he had to follow military orders first. He promised to return right after, but despite Ricky trying to sound brave, his shaky, weak voice made it clear to everyone that things were bad. The situation was incredibly dire. The family ended up glued to the television screen. Broadcasts kept insisting there was no immediate danger and that citizens should remain indoors. They urged everyone to stay home while the military handled it, but Mom was terrified. She whispered in fear that 20 towers had already risen worldwide, with every single passing day the reports grew more terrifying, with absolutely no end in sight. Until the TV stations and news channels went completely dead. After that, only the radio kept broadcasting. Then came the chilling announcement. Everyone had to evacuate to a shelter immediately. Hearing this, the family packed up their gear in a rush. Mom quickly left a note for her brother, letting him know they headed to the safety zone, on the streets. Things looked grim. It was pretty obvious the situation had spun out of control. Heavy military vehicles rolled past, but they brought absolutely zero comfort. The soldiers looked completely grim, as if they knew some horrible truth. Their heavy armor and armored trucks were covered in deep, terrifying claw marks. No normal animal made those. Then, a sickening smell of rot hit them. It drifted straight from the trucks. Now, even Sora's father was deeply worried. None of this made any sense. Soon, they arrived at the local gym, which was now a packed refugee camp. Hundreds of terrified survivors crowded inside. Yet the gym was dead silent. Nobody wanted to talk to each other. It felt like they were all just waiting to die, but of course, there are always terrible people who prey on the weak in a crisis. Right then, a massive bully cornered a young boy who was trying to eat a roll. The thug accused the kid of stealing his food, ignoring the child's desperate cries. The brute shoved him hard to the ground. A crowd watched the whole thing happen. But not a single soul stepped in to help. Everyone was just too selfish. They looked away, completely ignoring the cruel scene playing out right beside them. The bully stood over the kid, telling him his own food was not enough. So he was going to take the boy's bread too. This is just disgusting. Naturally, the weak child could not fight back against a grown man. He surrendered, his food sobbing in pure hunger and helplessness. But then, Sora's father intervened. He grabbed the thug's shoulder, demanding to know why he was being such a jerk. They were all struggling to survive, so why make things even worse for a kid? He ordered the bully to hand the bread back, but the punk just laughed it off. The brute told the old man to shut up and mind his own business. But before the bully could swing, the old man dropped him with a lightning-fast kick. Now the jerk was flat on the ground, groaning in pain. The father picked up the bread and handed it back to the boy, who stared in complete disbelief. He had never seen anyone stand up for him. The bully slowly dragged himself up, swearing he would get even. Honestly, Sora's dad could not have just stood by. He had to do what was right, but the bully's face was twisted in pure rage. Getting humiliated in front of the whole gym was something he would never forget. His name was Eiji Kagawa, a notorious local punk who lived to terrorize the weak. He and his gang routinely beat people up just for fun, to make matters worse. Sora was actually one of his main targets at school. The poor kid had never been able to defend himself against them. Suddenly, a soldier burst into the room. He yelled that everyone had to evacuate the gym through the back exits right now. They needed to load into the waiting military trucks outside. Terrified people demanded answers. But the soldier refused to say anything, calling it classified. They just had to move. Hearing this, a wealthy man in a suit lost his temper. They had been locked inside for days, and now they were being forced out without explanation. Ignoring their questions, only ordering them to flee, a man demanded respect, yelling about his taxes. Demanding respect from the authorities, but right then, a sudden noise caught everyone's attention. A soldier screamed, "They are here, we have to run." He was absolutely paralyzed with sheer terror. Sora grabbed his parents, telling them they had to hurry. It did not matter what was actually happening out there. They just needed to follow the soldier's orders and get to safety. Near the exit, a soldier tried to hold the heavy doors shut, yelling at them to hurry. "Get into the trucks," he roared, because he could not hold the door much longer. Seconds later, the doors shattered open. Horrific, humanoid monsters burst through the entrance. The soldier was torn apart instantly. These beasts were nightmares. Terrifying, powerful, and utterly starved for human flesh and blood. Panic finally set in. The crowd scrambled frantically toward the escape trucks. Sora's parents were already sprinting ahead, desperate to reach the vehicles. They kept looking back, screaming for their son to move faster and keep up. Sora finally reached the escape truck, but there was no room left. He begged his parents to leave without him. Desperate, his father tried to drag him aboard. But the terrified crowd inside turned hostile, shouting that there was no more room. They threatened to throw them both off. Seeing this, Sora broke free from his father's grip. He promised he would find another truck, leaving his parents safely inside the vehicle. But every single truck he ran to was already packed to the brim. Finally, Sora spotted the very last vehicle, and it actually had one open space. He reached out his hand, begging the passengers to pull him up so they could go. But a cruel twist of fate was waiting, his worst nightmare. It was Kagawa, the bully his father had punched in the face earlier. The vindictive bully kicked Sora right back down, snarling that he could die in his father's place. Sora collapsed onto the hard ground while the frantic crowd kept running right past him. He stared at the sky, knowing this was the end, even though his life had barely begun. He weakly begged for help, but his cries were lost in the chaotic screams of the crowd. Then, through the dust, a glowing, translucent figure began to materialize before him. It was the mysterious old man from his dreams, whispering that he would wait for him. Suddenly, Sora snapped back to his senses. He was still lying on the dirt. Was it all just a dream? Had he imagined this entire nightmare? Had he imagined it all, but right then, a terrifying shadow fell over him. A massive stone axe was hurtling down, aiming directly for his skull. Adrenaline surged, and Sora barely managed to roll out of the way just in time. The massive goblin slammed its weapon into the dirt, missing him by mere inches. Where in the world was he? Was this hell? Where were his parents? Another massive swing whistled past his head, grazing his cheek with deadly force. A fraction of an inch closer, and his head would have been completely split open. But the relentless beast kept chasing him, its bloodthirsty eyes locked onto its prey. Sora ran for his life, the heavy thuds of the giant goblin echoing right behind him. His mind raced, flashing back to that towering structure that rose from the earth. He remembered the smug face of Kagawa, the bastard who threw him off the truck. And that eerie, spectral old man who promised they would meet again. Every memory collided inside his head as he pushed his body to its absolute limit. Sora snapped, grabbing a sharp rock. He lunged directly at the monster. The creature did not expect it. He drove the stone straight into its chest. Now he stood towering over the lifeless body, staring down at his first kill. This thing looked like a game mob. It had a number 1 on its chest. What that meant was unclear, but Sora had no time to wonder. Suddenly, the entire ground began to shake, an earthquake here. A glowing magic stone began to rise from the goblin's body. Sora stood frozen. He had no clue what was happening. He watched in absolute awe as the stone floated right up to his face. Then it slammed into him. It pierced his chest with agonizing force, throwing him backward. He crashed hard. The glowing crystal was now embedded inside him. Oddly, there was no blood. The wound had already closed up completely. Then a massive surge of power rushed through his entire body. It was intense. He felt like he might actually explode. He realized what this was. Defeating monsters was leveling him up. Just like a video game, he grabbed the goblin's heavy axe. He had to find more of them. He needed to get stronger. But as he explored, he realized he was stuck on an island. There were no other monsters, no other people, just complete silence. Even worse, this strange island was literally floating high in the sky. Standing at the very edge, the only way off was a dangerous staircase. The steps hung in midair, winding around the outer cliffside. Shrouded in deep fog, the entire structure looked incredibly fragile. One wrong step meant death, and monsters could jump him any time. Taking a deep breath, he began his slow, careful descent. In normal games, areas like this usually led to a boss fight. If you fall, you just respawn, but this world felt way too real. And trust me, nobody wants to test if they have a second life here. Step by step, he made it down to the bottom safely. The stairs ended at the quiet entrance of some kind of stone chamber. Holding the heavy stone axe tightly, he cautiously stepped inside. He navigated through a series of narrow, winding corridors. Finally, he reached a massive room with a single lit tombstone. Strange runes were carved into the rock. Somehow, he could read them. The ancient writing became clear. It was a message. The fragments belonged to their bearers. Collect them all to leave. Only then would he earn the right to finally escape this place. Sora was in the abyss, and he had to collect every fragment to escape. At least he had a clear goal, and he felt incredibly motivated. That first fight was easy. He had to keep pushing forward. Pushing with all his might, he opened the heavy stone doors ahead. He had to reach the second level. The first monster had a number 1. That first zone was clear, but on the second floor, things changed. The space was much smaller, and the enemies would be tougher. Branded with the number 2, a pair of terrifying werewolves, on the third. Level 1 of the 4 beasts carried the number 3. This place was even. Tighter, the vital fragments only hid inside the bodies of these numbered monsters. These were the actual keys to advancing. Higher numbers meant far deadlier foes. But the thing worrying Sora most was that these keys became harder to track down with every single level. The total area doubled every time, quickly turning into a massive, endless territory. The amount of beasts he had to slaughter kept growing, and they became way more dangerous. Yet you really cannot ignore how much the young warrior himself was changing. He evolved with every tier he conquered, as the endless hours dragged on. Sora grew stronger, while the creatures in his path grew stranger. On the 12th floor, he faced the very same monsters that once raided the shelter where he hid with his parents back then. But today, those nightmare creatures were not even a challenge for him. He absolutely crushed them before moving forward, leaving only dust in his wake. Soon the 21st tier was cleared. Sora rushed onward, stopping for nothing. By the 30th floor, 500 million monsters filled the absolute darkness. Finding the key on these levels felt like searching for a tiny needle. In a massive haystack, certain key holders hid behind whole armies of beasts. Others preferred to isolate themselves deep inside tiny caves, forcing him to search. Literally every single inch of those incredibly massive and sprawling territories. Honestly, the sheer amount of time spent grinding is what annoyed him most. Still, no matter the exhaustion, Sora just kept pushing forward. He gathered fragment after fragment, slowly closing in on his ultimate goal. Another floor down and the young man kept moving. The abyss of the 42nd floor was crawling with hostile beasts flying, walking, and burrowing underground. Clearing them out while hunting down one fragment seemed completely impossible. Sora briefly tried to calculate what year or day it was now. But he quickly realized that trying to track time simply did not matter anymore. The only thing that counted was putting beasts down and taking those fragments. It was a continuous cycle of violence, a relentless slaughter of every creature. Everything around him turned to blood, and yet he kept walking. He blocked out the horrific scenery completely, ignoring the sheer madness of it. Sometimes the sheer weight of a life built only on killing makes you want to cry. There is absolutely nothing positive about this brutal, endless cycle. Slashing down another beast, Sora carves fresh notches on the wall. He has to track his progress somehow. By now, the young man's power had reached a level where fear simply ceased to exist for him. No opponent, no matter how monstrous, could ever intimidate him now. Then he finally crossed paths with a colossal beast holding this floor's key. A single one of its claws towered over the warrior, yet size meant nothing. Massive size or brute strength could never halt his progress. Every single challenger standing in front of him was already as good as dead. Even the proudest, strongest monsters fell after one swift strike from him. Power, much like time itself, had completely lost all its meaning. He needed the key to this level to destroy the monster. Back then, 20 massive towers suddenly appeared across the globe, rising right in the middle of major cities, before humanity could even understand the danger. These structures posed, a relentless flood of monsters began pouring out of them. The beasts nearly wiped out humanity, possessing power far beyond any mortal. That catastrophic event became known as Judgment Day, wiping out most of the population. Yet a handful of survivors awakened, gaining access to a mysterious system. It gifted them incredible combat abilities, granting the awakened immense power. Human society was instantly restructured around these powerful new warriors who founded hunter guilds and set out to clear territories while leveling up. Sora dashed after the fleeing monster, hoping this beast carried the fragment he needed. Suddenly, he heard human voices and froze. Believe it or not, they were discussing a rare teleportation scroll. Sora watched as the very monster he was tracking got caught in. Heavy chains lifting high into the air, the young man realized the exit from this stage, or maybe the entire game, was right up there. Gathering his strength, he leaped into the air with a powerful launch. Just then, a sudden system notification flashed right in front of him. It warned that an abyssal summon could not transport more than 2 living beings. Meanwhile, on Earth, a desolate wasteland outside the city crawled with deadly monsters and savage bandits. A desperate girl fled through the brush, running for her life. She desperately needed to lose her ruthless pursuers, but then her foot snagged on thick vines, as if the roots actively reached out to trap her. She crashed to the dirt, dropping her staff in the fall. Escape was impossible. Seconds later, a massive thug loomed over her, harshly demanding she hand over her advanced teleportation scroll. A rare level 60 scroll was far too valuable for a mere novice to hold. Choji sneered, warning her that she would face zero mercy if she refused. But Eika quickly begged him not to kill the girl, reminding them that combat between hunters was strictly forbidden by the rules. However, the brute Toshida scoffed. Rules meant absolutely nothing to him. He was the one who made the rules, thrusting his sword right in her face. The men demanded the scroll immediately, but she calmly warned them not to corner her. That was when Eika realized the girl was planning a forbidden, forced summon. She had to stop her right now. At the girl to seize the scroll, but she had already started the process, and now a strange, glowing aura enveloped her body. Suddenly, a massive summoning circle erupted in the clearing, signaling total disaster. Everyone realized things were going bad. She was determined, if she died, she would drag them down too. The forced ritual was summoning an incredibly high-tier monster, a beast that no human could ever control. They had to disrupt the spell and stop her before it was too late. But the reality around them was already warping. She quickly finished the summoning, unleashing a massive shockwave that rippled through the entire clearing. This powerful force threatened to knock out every warrior, mage, and barbarian. Feeling that overwhelming pressure, everyone instantly realized they were in for a terrible time. Once the teleportation finished, a bright beam of white light shot down from the sky, striking the center of the clearing and throwing dirt and rocks everywhere. When the smoke and dust finally settled, everyone saw an ordinary-looking little Cerberus, this tiny pup, definitely not a legendary beast. Everyone was completely stunned. Was this tiny thing really a Cerberus, and how did she even summon it? The guys immediately started laughing at her again for summoning such a weak creature, as it obviously could not protect her at all. But suddenly, a mysterious hand reached out right in front of the girl's face, and in an instant, the entire area was sprayed with fresh blood. A strange man had literally ripped the Cerberus in half with his bare hands, and now stood there looking around with a very confused expression on his face. The teenagers were seeing such a terrifying humanoid monster for the very first time. He came from a summoning scroll, looking absolutely monstrous, but wait, it was Sora. Looking around, he slowly realized the truth. He had actually escaped. Nothing else mattered to him now. He raised his hands high and started shouting loudly, celebrating the fact that he had finally broken out of the abyss. The kids watched this beast with pure terror. His laughter sent cold shivers down their spines, and a heavy pressure weighed on everyone. Sora finally stopped laughing and celebrating, turning his attention to the crowd with a curious look on his face. He walked over to Eika, who was too terrified to even breathe, and asked if this place was Earth. Once she nodded, Sora instantly cheered right up. He figured these people were just some weird cosplayers having fun in the woods. But the bullies from the Tiger Roar Guild warned him not to look down on Suddenly, they all charged at the strange beast together. But he did not even flinch. Instead, their swords shattered into pieces. Pure shock, Toshida realized this guy was an actual monster. Sora finally caught on that these people were not exactly friendly. He grabbed their leader by the throat and started squeezing tightly. With effortless ease, he lifted the massive guy high with one hand, demanding to see his number. Toshida had absolutely no clue what that meant, struggling to gasp for air. As his windpipe was crushed, fortunately, Sora did not actually want to kill him. He tossed him aside, but the terrified leader literally wet himself on the spot. Sora glared at the rest of the gang. "Leave," he ordered. Right now, honestly, he did not have to tell them twice. In a complete flash, the cowards from the Tiger Roar Guild scrambled away, running for their lives while silently swearing they would get revenge in the future. But deep down, they were utterly petrified after sensing his monstrous power. Aka stared at him, completely unable to comprehend who this guy actually was. He did not look like any monster from the abyss, yet there was simply no other logical explanation. Right then, Sora broke her train of thought and asked, how many years had gone by since the towers appeared? Apparently, 5 years had already passed, so he quickly demanded to know about the summon scroll, her weird clothes, and basically everything that had happened while he was gone. As she finished explaining, Sora realized that the human world had changed completely. The world changed drastically during his years in the abyss. 7 massive monster invasions had struck. His hometown was utterly gone. But you explained that powerful hunters were currently clearing out the beasts. Hopefully, normal life would return soon. Sora fell deep into thought. He listened closely to her, then asked for directions to his home. When he suddenly sped off in the right direction, Yu gasped. She was completely shocked and decided to tell her sister about him. At that exact moment, the Tiger Roar Guild members returned to base. They carried their beaten leader between them, since he could barely walk. Suddenly, a cloaked figure, either man or beast, crashed down in front of them. Dark energy poured from him as he demanded answers about a specific target. The Tiger Roar Guild members had exactly 3 seconds to start talking. Everyone stood frozen in absolute terror, completely unsure of what to do. It felt like their worst nightmare was repeating itself all over again. Before they could speak, the stranger coldly declared that time was up. In a flash of pure violence, he slaughtered the entire squad, 0 survivors. Later, a heavy silence settled over the Tiger Roar Guild headquarters. An operative reported that they had lost contact with Toshida's elite group. Both Yu and the scroll were gone, but Rich Mukai scoffed. He refused to believe such garbage, confident his elite men could never fail. They were supposed to easily capture a weak summoner like Yu. Yet the secretary revealed that their tracking signals had vanished instantly. They were wiped out in a single blow. This made Rich Mukai furious. He demanded a full investigation into who did this and why. They absolutely needed to capture Yu to find out what happened. The guild master was furious, promising to murder whoever touched his men. Right at that moment, the guild leader spotted a strange figure flying past his window. The mysterious figure left behind a thick, sickening scent of fresh blood. He was flying straight toward the Fallen Zone, a nest of monsters. But this latest invasion was on a completely different level of horror. Massive armies mobilized to fight, and the mysterious tower began to hum. Dormant for 5 long years, the ancient structure finally came alive again. With a major team missing, Rich Mukai ordered the search called off. A much more pressing crisis had arisen. Meanwhile, Sora reached his hometown. Standing atop a high building, watch how he surveys this utter nightmare. While he was trapped in that dark hell, his home rotted. It was a wasteland. Fortunately, Sora had not wasted his years away. Constant battles with demons had turned him into an absolute god. Over time, his humanity slowly faded, turning his emotions cold as ice. He shed every fragile trait that once made him weak and helpless. Sora had essentially become a monster, fueled by his own dark wrath. He slaughtered everything in his path, driven only by family memories. That single thread of warmth kept his shattered soul somewhat human. The terrifying beasts he once feared now looked incredibly pathetic to him. To Sora, the monsters he once feared were now just annoying little flies. Shooed them away, no fear, this city used to buzz with. Vibrant life, but now, absolute ruins, crumbled concrete lay. Everywhere, strangely, Sora found absolutely no signs of monster slaughter. After the evacuation order, not a single soul had stepped inside. No one had returned here. Honestly, this could be a pretty good or bad sign. He stepped inside his old apartment. The young man knew it would be completely empty, yet his feet dragged him here anyway for the memories. He scanned the dust, finding his old belongings from his past life. Sora spotted a single sheet of paper resting on the kitchen table. A letter from his dad, writing, "Dear Sora, they say you are dead. But your mother and I refuse to believe it. We moved your things into your room exactly as they were, knowing you will return to find us." They risked everything. His parents actually came back just to leave. This note, they even hung up his favorite clothes in the closet. Waiting for his return, beside the note, tucked inside the dresser, was a hand-drawn map leading directly to shelter number 6, where they had fled. Reading those emotional words, he knew he had to find them immediately. Next to the map sat a faded family photo, hoping their lost son would return. Sora pulled out a sharp knife, realizing how insanely strong he had become. He changed into a clean suit and used the blade to shear his hair short. The goal was simple now: end this entire apocalypse and reclaim his stolen days. Dressed sharp with a lighter head, Sora prepared to hunt down Shelter 6. His path lay east, according to the map, but the standard roads were completely choked with debris. Cutting his own trail would be much faster. He bolted forward. Suddenly, a colossal predatory bird screeched from the sky, aiming its razor claws straight for his throat, in a single breath. He tore the giant beast apart, leaping across the ruined city like a phantom. Nearby, 2 young sentries stood guard. One of them caught a weird whistling sound. But before he could even look, a blinding shockwave ripped past their post. It happened so fast, the guard barely registered the blur of motion. Another guard ran up with a phone, shouting that he caught the tail end. On video, they quickly huddled around to play it back in slow motion. Staring closely at the shaky video, their eyes widened in total disbelief. That impossibly fast blur tearing through the ruined city was actually a human. And even crazier, one of his hands was completely drenched in blood. Meanwhile, a terrified girl screamed, begging some scavengers to back away. Unbeknownst to them, Sora was soaring overhead, moving silently among the high cliffs. Down below, the shivering girl wept, apologizing for stepping into their territory. She cried out that she was just lost, searching for some scraps of food. The thugs grinned, telling her to relax because they were nice guys. Honestly, they had not seen such a pretty female survivor in ages. They told her she was completely safe now, promising to treat her right. She begged them to let her go, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. One of the men reached out with filthy hands, grinning wickedly. But just as he cornered her, a stranger appeared. A figure appears nearby, muttering that some things never change and nobodies will always stay nobodies. Enraged, the leader orders his thugs to grab him. Meddling in their business is a mistake. Armed thugs instantly rush forward with swords and daggers, but Sora easily blows them away without even lifting a finger. He lands heavy strikes while staying completely cool and composed. One swordsman thrusts straight at his face, but Sora catches his wrist midair and twists it aside, sending agonizing pain shooting right through the guy. This forces the thug leader to drop the girl, who instantly bolts for safety. The boss snarls that the Tiger Roar Guild will make him pay, but Sora just brushes his hair back, asking if Kagawa forgot the guy he personally murdered years ago. Kagawa freezes, completely unable to believe his own eyes. Is this really Sora Mukajima, the weakling he threw from a truck years back? Straight into a horde of monsters. Terrified, Kagawa screams for him to stay back. Unable to comprehend how this dead man is standing here, Sora grabs him by the throat, his grip tightening like a steel vise. After all, his nightmare started here. With this pathetic school bully, Sora growls that because of him, he had to claw his way out of absolute hell, and it is all Kagawa's fault. His grip squeezes tighter and tighter. He tells him that it is time to go. Straight to hell. Deep inside, Sora feels his inner demons screaming for blood. They want him to kill Kagawa, steal his power, and make him submit. Back then, things were completely one-sided, with Kagawa constantly beating and tormenting the helpless Sora Mukajima. The constant cycle of pain, humiliation, and despair never left him, but today he is finally paying back that debt. Kagawa used to boast that breaking someone's self-esteem felt amazing. With a heavy thud, Sora slams Kagawa onto the hard ground, leaving the former bully gasping and choking for air, genuinely believing his life was over. Looking down, Sora realizes he cannot become the same heartless monster that tortured him, and yet letting trash like this run free only hurts innocent people. Sora tells him that since his attempt to kill him failed, his life is spared today, but he is not getting off that easy. For turning his high school years into a brutal nightmare, one strike. For abusing the weak, another strike. For throwing him out of that truck. Trying to end his life, 2 final hits. Sora makes it clear that 4 blows will settle the score. Now watch. Kagawa starts crying, begging for mercy and whining that a single strike from Sora will kill him. Sora calmly tells him not to worry, promising to keep his strikes gentle but precise. The second blow connects, just as some other guild members arrive nearby. Frozen in absolute horror, as they watch their boss get systematically dismantled. The third strike lands hard, sending a fresh spray of blood everywhere. It is time for the final blow, but Sora has no desire to become a mindless murderer. He is not a monster and does not want to take lives. So he just drives a brutal kick straight into Kagawa's face, crushing him down. Looking down at his work, Sora inspects the broken bully, now left completely blind and shattered. The revenge is sweet, and he is fully satisfied. Sora coldly orders the terrified guild members standing nearby to take their boss. They drag their older friend to the hospital, completely vanishing from Sora's life forever. With his debts finally settled, Sora could quickly move on with his journey. He still had to find his missing parents. Meanwhile, the city was heavily locked down. Armed soldiers patrolled the entire outer perimeter, keeping a constant eye out for danger. Their sole job was to stop any beast from reaching the civilian safe zones. The commander barked orders at his men, warning them not to turn cowardly. If the enemy struck, they had to hold the walls and fight back. Vigilance was everything. After all, nobody knew when a strike would come. One relaxed private figured they were safely tucked away behind the lines. He confidently claimed that no monster could ever breach this far. Talk about absolute worst timing, because the very next second, a massive beast tore him to shreds. The remaining soldiers froze in absolute terror. Towering right over the defensive wall was a horrific kraken's offspring. It glared down at them with one giant, mocking eye. The lieutenant panicked. He screamed at his troops to hold the line and open fire immediately. A relentless hail of bullets flew, but it quickly became painfully clear that their standard military arsenal was doing absolutely zero damage. To make matters worse, the massive creature barely even flinched. It slowly crawled forward on its writhing, heavy tentacles. The first lieutenant yelled for everyone to scatter and find cover. But the beast lashed out, instantly slicing men clean in half. The terrified lieutenant ordered a full, desperate retreat to safety. Yet one stubborn soldier refused to run from this giant octopus. Grabbing a crate of heavy explosives, he tucked it under his arm. He charged straight ahead while the rest of his squad provided cover. Slipping right up to the beast, he prepared to plant the charge. Gunfire echoed everywhere, but suddenly the giant eye locked onto him. A razor-sharp tentacle whipped through the air, targeting the private's head. Death was coming fast, far too fast for him to dodge. He braced for the end, but the creature suddenly let out a bizarre chirp. The lieutenant blinked, catching the beast's sudden hesitation. Something out there had actually managed to terrify this massive monster. Nobody knew what caused the fear, but the private seized the moment. He lit the fuse and shoved the dynamite directly under the creature's belly. A massive, deafening blast erupted, engulfing the entire street in fire. Things grew incredibly chaotic as thick smoke and heat filled the air. Once the black smoke cleared, everyone realized the horrible truth. The monster was completely unharmed, still glaring down at them. Its massive eye burned with pure rage, ready to wipe them out. The brave private trembled, realizing his attack had not even left a mark. Seriously, how do you even fight something this completely broken? The beast raised its sharp limb, aiming to finish off the boy. He could only stare at his impending doom. Then, out of nowhere, a mysterious figure dropped onto the beast, landing right on its eye. He started tearing the monster apart with his bare hands. Their jaws hit the floor. It was crystal clear who the Kraken's offspring was actually terrified of. Dark blood sprayed as Sora stood victoriously on top of the slain monster's body. Crimson rivers pooled from the carcass. The lieutenant stared in complete shock. Some kid had just slaughtered a monstrosity that survived a direct military blast. Only a handful of people in the entire nation possessed that kind of power. Terrifying power, yet he'd never seen a reborn like this. One thing was certain, he needed info on this stranger fast. He quickly triggered his special appraisal skill to gather intel. It was designed to reveal everything about any chosen target. But this time, the lieutenant completely froze in sheer shock. Suddenly, a massive Crimson System warning flashed right before his eyes. It commanded him to show respect before his consciousness completely faded away. The nearby privates lunged forward to catch their falling commander. Sora just turned to a terrified soldier, demanding quick answers. He wanted to know the distance to the 6th shelter. The private stammered that it lay 50 kilometers north, but there was a catch. But to get there, he would have to cross through the deadly Zone X. He explained it was a chaotic buffer zone holding back the monster tide. Beasts were funneled directly into that zone to minimize civilian casualties. But the place was also crawling with other hunters. Just then, another soldier sorting through the carcass let out an excited shout. High-value loot had dropped straight from the dead Kraken offspring. Honestly, who wouldn't want real-world monster drops in a crisis like this? Sora then wondered how tough that creature actually was for regular fighters. The private admitted that a level 45 monster was a complete nightmare. But to Sora, completely trivial, it was barely a warm-up. He casually asked how many monsters above level 45 were roaming the buffer zone. The private estimated there were probably under 100 of them out there. Otherwise, humanity would have been completely wiped out long ago. Sora turned to leave, but the young soldier desperately called out to him. Bowing deeply, he apologized for pushing his luck with a shameless favor. He practically begged the powerful stranger to go to Zone X. Someone with Sora's godlike skills could save countless innocent lives out there. He pleaded with him to protect the civilians if he had the chance. Sora simply asked if the fastest path to the shelter crossed that zone. The soldier nodded quickly, confirming it was the only way. He would go, slaughtering any beast unfortunate enough to cross his path. Soon, the platoon retreated to their frontline base, carrying their unconscious leader. They needed to get their injured lieutenant to a doctor immediately. When Kagura finally opened his eyes, he sat up and asked how long he was out. A soldier replied that it had only been 10 minutes, thanks to some high-grade drops. The healing potions from the beast had worked like an absolute charm. The commander immediately wanted to know where their mysterious savior had gone. They explained that right after Kagura collapsed, the young man simply walked away. He parted ways and headed straight into the north. Suddenly, Kagura gasped. Something clicked. He demanded to know exactly where the stranger had gone. And the private confirmed he was heading straight for the sixth shelter. He went right through Zone X, showing zero hesitation and not caring about the risk. Kagura gritted his teeth. Patch me through to command immediately. Sweat dripped down his face. Only 10 minutes remained before the whole place went up. Time was running out. He prayed he could make it before it was too late. A soldier rushed over, desperately trying to establish a connection on the emergency radio. It worked, confused but obedient. The private quickly handed over the video communicator. Kagura grabbed the screen, his chest tightening as the video feed finally loaded. The operation was highly classified, meaning the common troops had no idea. But this mission was completely different. Zone X was a lost cause. The military could no longer contain the monsters overflowing from the area. Their solution wiped them out. A massive bombing run was scheduled to begin. They wanted absolute obliteration, leaving no monster alive in the entire zone. Meanwhile, at headquarters, the staff was frantically tracking the incoming countdown. Suddenly, an operator announced an urgent emergency transmission from Zone B-22. Commander Renji Kumagai grunted, agreeing to take the high-priority call. Within seconds, the pale, panicked face of Lieutenant Kagura filled the monitor. He barked out his identification code, saluting with trembling hands. Kagura quickly reported that they had a massive crisis on their hands. A mysterious, unregistered hunter had just entered the danger zone. Worst of all, he knew absolutely nothing about the impending strike. Kumagai just scoffed, asking if the lieutenant was calling to report his own failure. Why did his troops fail to detain this single intruder? Kagura swallowed his pride, pleading with the commander to listen carefully. They had to stop the bombing and warn the target immediately. The hunter was incredibly powerful, and losing him would be a devastating blow. Kumagai rarely heard of such talent and narrowed his eyes. He demanded to know exactly what level this mysterious stranger was. Kagura hesitated, knowing his next words would make him look utterly foolish. He had to admit he had no idea what the guy's level actually was. The commander sneered, summarizing the absurd story he was being told. Some rule breaker walked into a war zone, and Kagura wanted a rescue. His assistant chimed in, noting the hunter was likely already dead. And get this, Kumagai actually found this entire desperate plea hilarious. It only proved that the lieutenant was completely lacking in brains. Still, the idiot was quite excellent at providing some cheap amusement. Kumagai smirked, turning to look at the blonde officer sitting beside him. He drawled that her subordinate had clearly not been trained well enough. Directly disciplining another officer's troops was out of the question, but reporting her failure to high command would surely ruin her. Tanasaki stared at the fat pig, keeping her expression cold. Was he seriously trying to sabotage a colleague while facing the enemy? She was absolutely furious. The lieutenant had technically bypassed protocol, but his only goal was to save a human life from destruction. A mysterious stranger. They knew exactly how critical this operation was. The room fell dead silent. Everyone weighed their next move carefully. How could they successfully finish this mission without triggering a complete disaster? Finally, Tanasaki spoke up. She doubted the lieutenant meant harm. Still, a warning was necessary. She needed to make that clear. If his excuse fell flat, she would personally put him on trial. She turned to General Kumagai, hoping he would agree with her. Kumagai wanted no part of this mess and just wanted quick answers. He sternly demanded Kagura give them an explanation that would satisfy everyone. Kagura explained the reason. An unknown hunter had killed a massive beast. A level 45 kraken cub, slain with one single blow, Tanasaki gasped. This meant they were dealing with a hunter ranked far above A rank. Impossible, the general replied. Every S-rank hunter was currently accounted for. They were all deployed elsewhere, and Zone B-22 remained completely silent. The commander demanded answers. Why could Kagura not read this person's level? Especially since the lieutenant possessed the unique skill to easily evaluate anyone. Kagura hesitated. He had to admit he could not gauge their rank. He even had to admit that the moment he tried using his appraisal ability, he blacked out completely. The information overload shattered his mind. This meant only one thing: the stranger's strength stat exceeded 100. Such extreme power was legendary, yet the general was not easily convinced. This was no excuse to stop the operation. Right then, a newcomer arrived. Eastern Commander Nao Yuasa stepped into the room, cold and demanding. The military does not halt operations for mere rumors, he stated. Thousands of soldiers from 4 separate units were already fully deployed. They had completely secured the entire perimeter around the bombing zone. The garrison was supposed to clean up whatever survived the airstrike. But call an emergency alert now. That would invite pure disaster. Every beast in the area would instantly swarm the noise, crushing their entire perimeter. If that happens, this sector falls and thousands of soldiers die. They would not even have time to draw weapons. Talk about a brutal situation. No one in the high command would trade thousands of lives for one. The risk is simply too high, even if that person is a powerful S-rank hunter. They could only regret his poor timing. There was nothing more to say. Another heavy silence filled the room. Finally, Tanasaki made her call. She officially rejected the lieutenant's request to delay the bombing. They would not throw away everyone's hard work for a single life. The decision was final, case closed. With that, the brief meeting ended. Kagura knew he did his best. Still, the outcome was devastating. He had completely failed to save them, and in this world, results are everything. Outside, a young private noticed the car keys on the lieutenant's belt. A crazy, desperate plan flashed in his mind. Now watch what he does. He snatched the keys off the belt and bolted toward the vehicle. The commander screamed for him to get back. The strike was starting. But the private did not listen. He had exactly 6 minutes left. Before it started, and he had to warn them, the lieutenant was absolutely furious, demanding that the soldier return. Did the private really want to face a court-martial? The other soldiers waited for their commander's order since they could have chased their comrade down to bring him back, but the lieutenant refused. He muttered that the private made the decision himself and was well aware of the risks. Meanwhile, the young soldier was speeding through the ruined city streets in a car. He had to warn the mysterious stranger. When the private sped off, he did not even know whom he was actually risking his life to save. After all, nobody could have guessed that this young man would become the ultimate hope of humanity. But soon, the soldier realized he could not find any trace of him. Time was running out, and he had absolutely no clue where to go next. He took the absolute shortest route, but the minutes slipped by with no savior in sight. He realized if he could not find him, the guy was moving faster than the car. Once he reached Zone 10, he could turn on the loudspeaker so the stranger would definitely hear him, but at the same time, doing this was incredibly dangerous because the local monsters would also hear him and attack. But the choice was made. The soldier sitting inside his car on the wrecked street grabbed the speaker and started broadcasting warnings. He introduced himself as the guy who was rescued from dying under the claws of the Kraken's child, and now the young soldier wanted to warn his savior that this entire place would soon be bombed. They had to run. He repeated those urgent words over and over until Sora finally heard the warning. Sora heard about the incoming bombing and finally understood why the streets were so empty. While local beasts were no threat to him, he could not survive. The intense blast of the explosions, it was best to avoid risks. Sora noticed hordes of monsters flying toward the voice, realizing that the brave private had risked his life to warn him. The soldier in the car still did not know if the stranger heard him. He looked out. Anxiously, now watch, Sora decided he could not let this kind private die. The soldier spotted the vicious beasts closing in fast. He had definitely drawn their entire attention. He had to leave right away with only 1 minute remaining before the airstrike started. Still, the brave soldier refused to leave. Because the stranger was still out there, then suddenly someone knocked on his window, and thankfully it was not a beast. The soldier was thrilled to see his savior alive and well, who quickly asked why this zone was getting bombed. Unfortunately, there was no time to explain because the timer ran out and the brutal bombardment of Zone X began. Swarms of missiles and heavy shells rained down from the sky, slamming into the waves of monsters and blowing them to pieces. The entire area became a raging inferno. Sora quickly levitated massive stone slabs to shield himself, the vehicle, and the private. Once the massive bombing run ended, the successful wipeout was reported to the general. He immediately ordered military drones to be deployed to find any surviving monsters and tally the final kill count. They were heading. After a short while, the drones reported absolutely zero signs of life. But the general only worried, where on earth had the monsters gone? Tanasaki immediately corrected him, stating that the giant beasts were still in the bomb zone. On the contrary, they were completely unharmed by the bombing. The military refused to believe this and demanded to see drone footage. It was simply impossible to believe anyone could survive such a massive, crushing attack. But the live feed showed glowing dome-shaped shields protecting the beasts. This entire high-yield military bombardment had turned out to be completely and utterly useless. Monsters couldn't do this alone. Someone else was pulling the strings. Soon, the scanning system spotted the clear silhouette of a man with long white hair. He was the one casting the protective shields around the massive horde. Suddenly, the furious monsters aggressively clawed down the drones, completely destroying their only eyes there. Down in Zone X, the beasts were snatching the flying scout drones. They crushed them easily in their claws and chewed them up like nuts. Just like that, contact was lost. Tanasaki stood there in shock. They knew this wave of monsters would be tough, but nothing prepared them for this. This was a whole new level of threat, highly coordinated and dangerous. These creatures didn't just hide under protective shields, they actively targeted their aerial reconnaissance. The High Command finally realized they were in deep, critical trouble. They ordered an immediate evacuation of the garrison, urging everyone to retreat. But a sudden, frantic report from the radio operator threw their entire defense plan into disarray. The horde wasn't even heading toward the main defensive walls. Instead, the entire army of massive beasts was marching with terrifying focus toward Zone B-22. Tanasaki remembered that was where the mysterious hunter had gone. This had to be connected to him. In a panic, she ordered absolutely all their remaining drones to head directly toward his last known coordinates. To understand what was happening, they had to find what stopped the beasts. Meanwhile, back in the ruined blast zone, the thick dust finally begins to settle slowly. Slowly, it was possible to look around and see what had happened. A young private crawled out of his armored vehicle, looking around in absolute shock. Against all possible odds, the bombardment had stopped, and he was still somehow breathing. It was a literal miracle, prompting the soldier to laugh with pure relief. But Sora quickly warned him, wait, it was way too early to celebrate just yet. If he survived, it meant the monsters did too, and they were coming. Before Sora could explain any further, his sharp instincts picked up a sudden threat. He forcefully shoved the private down, just as a scout drone buzzed right overhead. It crashed nearby, exploding into pieces right in front of them. The private realized the horde was deliberately targeting their eyes in the sky. This level of coordinated, tactical intelligence was completely unheard of. Sora warned him that they would have plenty of time to be surprised later on. An endless variety of massive beasts was closing in from every side. The young soldier stared, completely frozen by the sheer scale of the approaching threat. This was easily the elite squad of the entire monster wave. And to make matters worse, their terrifying leader was level 90. Every single one of them was completely untouched by the blast. That soldier's end was quite near. The private was already starting to panic. He knew death was coming, but his comrade remained pretty calm. Sora noted that they were both completely unharmed despite the heavy bombardment. If those bombs failed, they would just have to kill them themselves. Sora ordered the soldier into the jeep before charging toward the giant mountain. He plunged straight into the monsters, slicing off heads left and right. Suddenly, the monster leader swung a massive axe directly down at him. But the boy stopped it barehanded, staring his giant opponent down. Ripping the heavy axe away, Sora leaped high up to counterattack. He was incredibly focused, channeling raw strength straight into his fist. He rocketed toward the colossal monster at an absolutely mind-blowing speed. Just one devastating punch to the skull was enough to tear it apart. Sora landed on the shoulder, quite pleased, when another figure appeared. The stranger stood on the opposite side. Finally, they faced each other. Sora closely watched the mysterious cloaked stranger with long white hair. Somehow, the young warrior had not sensed this guy approaching him. The cloaked stranger clearly expected this and looked completely satisfied. He had been waiting for this encounter, but then things got weird. The monster's head suddenly regenerated, transforming into a terrifying new shape. It turned to Sora, calling him a thief and demanding its property back. Honestly, who even is this guy? Sora was completely in the dark. The white-haired stranger spoke up, claiming someone had stolen a great power. He told Sora that he would have to pay with his own life. With that, a massive swarm of razor-sharp swords flew directly at Sora. But the boy effortlessly shattered them, using his own raw energy. He broke the remaining blades to pieces. Is that all you have? If so, he was ready to just pack up and go home. Sora pointed his own weapon back. You cannot kill me like this. The colossal beast tried to swat Sora off its shoulder with its hand. But the boy did not budge and had no intention of moving. Up above, military drones suddenly appeared, filming the entire epic showdown. The white-haired stranger sensed their spying presence in the sky immediately. Meanwhile, Sora was calmly catching the giant's crushing paw with one hand. He held it back effortlessly, even as it tried to crush him. The boy told the beast that it needed to try much harder. If you actually want to kill me, take this seriously. Sora thrust his spear deep into the giant, but noticed something strange. The cloaked stranger had completely vanished. He was gone in an instant. Sora did not even have time to track where he went. Searching the area, he realized the stranger was incredibly displeased. He absolutely despised being watched by weak, pathetic human onlookers. These lower beings always annoyed him, so he pointed at the drones. They needed to be dealt with right this second. Right then, a massive, monstrous pterodactyl flew straight up. It snatched the drone in its claws, tearing it completely apart. Even after losing his drone, the scout managed to complete his mission and was all ready, studying the recorded video footage with intense interest. That masked hunter on the screen was definitely Sora. There was absolutely no doubt about it. The scout realized Sora single-handedly forced those monsters to redirect. He had faced an entire onslaught alone, making the commander's immediate report absolutely crucial. Instantly, but there was absolutely no time to send it. A massive octopus crashed through the ceiling, trapping the man inside. He screamed in terror, and right on cue, more beasts started climbing up the walls. Clearly drawn by the noise, the cloaked master ordered them to kill. Slaughter everyone in the building, he laughed maniacally, completely enjoying the bloody chaos. Meanwhile, Sora remembered the words of the soldier he had saved. That terrified private believed a strong hunter like Sora could actually save everyone from this. Right then, the soldier snapped out of his panic. Time to run. He desperately tried starting the getaway car, but the broken engine just clicked completely uselessly. Dead, Sora knew that to win quickly, he had to strike first. He targeted their leader and leaped straight off the giant's shoulder. If he truly wanted to save these people, he had to eliminate every single enemy. The colossal beast lunged, preparing to slam a heavy fist down. But Sora was way too quick, diving out of the way before the hit landed. Still, he realized that after fusing with that stranger, the beast's striking power had skyrocketed. Every single punch carried absolutely devastating power now. The cloaked stranger kept attacking, whipping thick tentacles in every direction. Sora finally got a close look at his opponent, and trust me, this part is wild. He froze in shock. The cloaked stranger looked exactly like him. Taking advantage of that split-second shock, the clone gathered dark energy. He prepared to unleash a massive, killing blow to end Sora right then and there. The danger was real. That heavy sword hummed with lethal power. To make matters worse, the clone laughed, confidently claiming he would die right here. But Sora stayed completely calm, keeping his focused gaze locked onto the incoming blade. As the sword rushed forward, the clone declared death was his fate. But Sora was smarter. He struck the clone's arm with full force. In one swift, powerful motion, he snatched the massive sword directly from his grip. Disarmed, the clone leaped backward onto the giant beast's shoulder. Sora examined the heavy weapon, feeling a strange vibration from it. It radiated a dark energy that felt incredibly, deeply familiar to his own body. This power was almost identical to the abyss where he survived. The cloaked clone was visibly furious, glaring with intense hatred at his stolen weapon. He spat out in anger, "Is stealing weapons the only trick you actually have?" Sora just stood silently on the ground, holding the massive, heavy sword in his hands. But a second later, the weapon began to fade and crumble. The steel completely dissolved into black smoke, proving how versatile this abyss power truly was. Clearly, there were dark techniques here he had never even imagined. Sora realized this battle was going to be a long, brutal one. First things first, he had to get that stranded private far away from this zone. Sora rushed over to the private, asking if he could still run. Afraid of heights, it was pretty unclear why he even asked, but the young soldier shook his head. He definitely was not. Right then, Sora grabbed the heavy military jeep and hoisted it right onto his shoulder, yelling that they were about to fly. The strange guy in the raincoat watched this, absolutely loving the ridiculous show. To him, Sora was just a complete fool who did not respect abyss magic. The robed man began pooling dark energy all around his body, until it bloomed like a giant, toxic flower. He truly believed that the strong were never meant to shield the weak. Then, he activated the Eye of Darkness to draw in even more power. Right after that, he unleashed a massive, devastating blast directly at Sora, aiming to wipe him out along with the soldier. Sora realized his opponent was incredibly fast, even if he ran now. The enemy would easily track him down. He had to try something else. Dropping the jeep back to the ground, Sora charged straight ahead, aiming to smash that Eye of Darkness. The young warrior was totally locked in. He closed the distance quickly, funneling every bit of his energy into his fist. But after landing a massive strike, Sora realized it did absolutely nothing. That glowing circle was his opponent's true form, and he just wasn't strong enough yet. Suddenly, a panic scream echoed from below. An attack was closing in on the jeep where he had left the soldier. Sora screamed at the man to jump out of the vehicle immediately, but the soldier could not hear his warnings over his own terrified screams. He dodged wildly as dark tentacles closed in on him. Then, a massive blast of energy tore straight through the vehicle. The soldier choked on his own blood. Letting out a horrific gurgling sound, Sora lunged. He had to save him. He frantically tried tearing apart the sharp spikes that had impaled the car. The villain casually stood on top of the ruined vehicle, looking down. He smugly told Sora not to get so worked up and to stop wasting his energy. But inside the wreckage, the private's body was already completely riddled with holes. Shockingly, the young soldier was still barely alive, weakly moaning in pain. What happens next is pure nightmare fuel. Zombie energy was actively pumping through him. Despite his horrific wounds, a creepy smile spread across the private's face. The stranger laughed, telling Sora that his fate as the seed of the abyss was to watch his loved ones die right in front of him. Sora snapped. He kept hacking violently at the spikes, trying to reach the villain. Sora realized this cloaked monster took sheer pleasure in completely crushing people's self-respect. Well, if that was the game, he was going to tear him apart right now. The killer just laughed and unleashed a brutal obsidian storm spell. Sora did not even flinch. He did not care about the obvious danger. He simply pushed forward, while jagged black stones sliced right through his skin. The attacker kept firing wave after wave of deadly shards. But Sora stood his ground against the onslaught, completely refusing to back down. He spat out that trash like this, who only exist to hurt others, made him absolutely sick. With one final strike, Sora sliced the massive pins, sending the entire vehicle crashing down to the hard earth below. Sora leaped through the chaos, desperately reaching out to catch the soldier's body. Holding the young man tight, they crash-landed into the arms of the soldier. He had originally wanted to save his life from the deadly airstrike. But that soldier was long gone, and a necromancer now controlled his shell. Gently laying the body inside the car, Sora softly apologized to him. He hated dragging him into this mess and failing to protect him. Suddenly, danger flared. Sora sensed the cloaked enemy creeping up behind him. Dodging with crazy reflexes, Sora spun on his heel to counter. He lunged headfirst at the cloaked figure before he could even react. The stranger slipped back, calling his desperate struggle completely and utterly useless. To him, a mere newbie using the abyss power stood absolutely no chance. He proudly began to gloat that absolutely no one could ever hope to defeat him, but then a massive fist to the jaw instantly shut him up. Sora did not care. Sora kept swinging, walloping the stranger before slamming his body violently into the dirt. The cloaked figure reeled in absolute disbelief. This made no sense. How could some random kid land a clean hit? Sora simply smiled, knowing that warriors do not stay weak forever. They always adapt and grow. The stranger realized very quickly that he was in serious trouble. Sora had mastered the abyss power simply by watching him fight in real time. Before the villain could even react, Sora completely vanished from his line of sight. He reappeared right behind him, ready to strike, forcing a frantic retreat. The stranger frantically dodged, forced to admit his opponent was highly skilled. This battle was getting out of hand. Sora realized a game of tag had begun. His opponent was lightning fast and could easily outrun him in a sprint. Even with incredible agility, the foe could never dodge a crushing physical blow. Sora delivered a devastating slash, splitting the giant monster clean in half. As the enemy unleashed another dark skill, Sora knew he had to finish this. He needed a clean shot at the power core, hidden deep inside its massive, shifting body. Finding that sweet spot was easier said than done, but it was his only option. Once shattered, his opponent would be finished. Channeling his power, Sora pushed his limits. With a fierce yell, he tore the giant beast apart, stopping its regeneration. Pure energy incinerated the remains, turning the flesh into ash. Searing fire swept through the battlefield. With the beast dead, Sora turned his gaze. Locking eyes with the cloaked man, he declared that his time was finally up. The stranger refused to die, even though he knew he had lost this round. He promised to remember this defeat before they crossed paths again. Unleashing his final trump card, he activated his Unity of Shadows technique. Every monster nearby dissolved into dark energy, gathering into a massive sphere. Sora braced himself, calling upon his own strength to face the incoming shockwave. The destructive force exploded outward in one direction, obliterating the surrounding terrain. As the blinding storm of dust and power finally began to clear, silence followed. The monsters and their boss had completely vanished. Sora sighed, amazed the guy pulled off such an impressive escape. His clothes were completely shredded from the blast. Talk about a rough fight. Fortunately, his parents' old photo was still safe in his front pocket. Walking back to the damaged car, Sora looked down at the body of the soldier. A fallen soldier lies there, likely leaving behind a family who still waits for him. With a heavy heart, Sora takes the dog tag to eventually contact his grieving family. A heavy mark, but Sora knows this battle with the Shadow Manipulator is far from over. That twisted villain has absorbed a massive swarm of darkness and could strike back any time. Smiling from the dark, the mysterious foe relishes what he calls a beautiful, tragic fate. He wants to force Sora to watch every single person he loves perish in agony. Sora silently vows to end this monster once and for all, no matter what. He must never let this psycho get anywhere near the innocent civilians taking cover. Sora realizes he needs to sprint to the shelter right now to defend his loved ones. But he must run. Suddenly, tactical military drones reappear to scan the area. High above, Captain Tanasaki commands her operators to scan every square inch of the ruins. She wants a thorough sweep, making absolutely certain that nothing slips through their net. Meanwhile, the ground troops are ordered to move in and search the sector carefully. Everyone remains on high alert. Suddenly, a drone pilot spots something incredible on his screen. Totally stunned, the guy tries to call the captain over to see the monitor. But Captain Tanasaki has already marched up the hill herself to assess the situation. She looks out, stunned to see that the entire horde of monsters has been completely wiped out. She quickly instructs her team to pull up all recorded footage of the zone. A massive clash. This whole battlefield tells an incredibly violent, tragic story. She looks around, reading the absolute, devastating chaos of this brutal battlefield. It seems the elite hunter, whom Lieutenant Kagura mentioned, was actually here. He somehow survived the heavy shelling and completely annihilated the entire horde. Just then, an excited operator calls her over, urgently needing her to see this. They manage to recover a crashed drone with its memory card fully intact and readable. The recovered footage gives them a direct, front-row seat to the insane battle. Unbelievable, the footage she begins watching is absolutely, completely mind-blowing. Her eyes widen. She instantly recognizes Private Masra in the bombardment zone. Right beside him is the exact hunter the brave soldier tried so hard to save. Elsewhere on the field, a private standing guard spots a strange, glowing light. It is shining brightly from deep underneath a pile of heavy concrete rubble. A glowing prize, he digs out rare items, including a massive energy potion. It boosts strength. Beside it lies an ancient royal dagger and other legendary loot. His buddy notices the bright glow too and asks him what he just found. The greedy soldier lies, claiming he has not found anything cool at all. He says this while sneakily hiding a heavy, metallic chest right behind his back. But his comrade leaps down anyway, instantly spotting the loot with a grin. He knows right away these are ultra-rare drops left behind by the swarm boss. A huge crime. He reminds his buddy that pocketing squad drops is forbidden. But of course, this clever guy knows exactly how to handle the situation. After a brief pause, he suggests they split the valuable treasure between themselves. The greedy finder speaks up, saying he only wants to keep the chest. But his partner is no fool and refuses to hand over the chest. Everyone knows that top-tier, legendary loot is always locked inside those boxes. His buddy lines in with a cold stare, telling him not to overthink. He whispers that the private actually has no choice in this matter at all. Throwing his weight around to scare the poor soldier, the man grabbed the chest. Grinning, he finally held the legendary golem relic in his hands. Eventually, Sora made it to the outer boundary of shelter number 6. A massive wall blocked the view, with crowds gathered nearby. Armed guards patrolled the high walls, keeping a close eye on everything. They searched every civilian and vehicle passing through, but everything remained quiet. Apparently, the terrifying Shadow Master had not arrived in this area yet. Sora touched down on the pavement and started walking through the busy streets. Shocking, brutal scars, his body was completely covered in them, drawing endless stares. He kept scanning his surroundings, no sign of the Shadow Lord. He could not sense a single powerful aura nearby, which spelled trouble. Without a powerhouse to defend them, this place was completely doomed. Suddenly, a monk appeared out of nowhere. He blocked Sora's path entirely. The man was either blind or just hiding his face behind a heavy bandage. He remarked on the heaviness of Sora's blood, asking if he came from the outside. Sora simply nodded, and the strange monk burst into a sudden, bizarre fit of laughter. "That is great news," the monk chuckled, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out some cash, insisting he only wanted to buy some information. Counting out cash, he rolled the thick stack of bills tight. He thrust the money forward, begging for news about the wilderness. Recognizing the local currency, Sora immediately decided to take the deal. Sora would tell him everything, but first, he had to ask something. "Why did you call me your grace?" Sora asked, eyeing the stranger. The monk simply smiled, brushing it off as nothing but a silly habit. He claimed the strange outfit and the blindfold were just part of his look. Still laughing, the man slowly reached up to peel back the heavy bandages. He explained that a nasty eye infection forced him to keep them covered. But as the cloth shifted, Sora caught a glimpse of his actual eyes. An intense, terrifying light flashed behind them, sending a chill down his spine. A wolf in sheep's clothing, a dangerous powerhouse, was hiding in this shelter. Sora immediately dropped the subject, shifting the focus back to the deal. "So what exactly do you want to know about the outside?" Sora asked. The monk beamed, eager to finally get some real answers about the wilderness. Sora explained that heavily armed soldiers were currently fortifying the outer walls. They looked ready for a massive fight. Oblivious civilians heard nothing, but the monk had clearly heard distant explosions. He wanted to know every single detail about those blasts. Sora just laughed, claiming he was merely running an errand when it happened. "I got terrified, dropped my delivery letter, and just ran," Sora lied. The monk smiled, immediately realizing this young man was also hiding his true strength. It was obvious that both of them had their own deep secrets to protect. Nodding in respect, the monk thanked him for the valuable details. He handed over the cash, and the two went their separate ways. Yet Sora could not help but watch the blindfolded man walk away alone. Turning back to the bustling shelter, a new curiosity began to stir inside him. Sora wanted to know how many high-level fighters were around, but he couldn't. He couldn't feel their presence. He walked down the street half-naked, but nobody bothered him. Sora wondered why the military let someone as suspicious as him wander around so freely. Maybe the threat of a common enemy made people a lot more tolerant of strangers. Why waste precious energy hating each other? Once he finally reached the center of the shelter, he headed straight for a store. The money he got from the monk was more than enough to buy some clothes. Finally dressed, he was ready to begin the search for his missing family. Night was already falling as the young man walked down the darkening streets. Sora decided to stick to a simple, old-fashioned search method. He pulled out a single photograph showing his entire family together. Spotting a girl walking nearby, he decided to approach her. Sora pointed to the picture and asked if she recognized the people in it. She took one quick look, and her face instantly filled with pure terror. After muttering that she did not know them, she quickly hurried away. Sora watched her go. It seriously looked like she had just seen a ghost. Right then, a noisy guy walking down the road caught his attention. The thug had his hands in his pockets, loudly picking fights with everyone. Before long, he swaggered over to Sora and demanded to know his business. Sora clearly did not look like a local, so he needed to explain himself. Who goes around questioning people with a photo in the middle of the night? It felt like some primitive system from the last century. Sora simply turned the photo toward him, asking if he knew the couple. The thug immediately broke out in a cold sweat, and his face turned pale with alarm. He aggressively demanded to know where Sora got the photo and what he wanted. Sora decided to be completely honest, seeing no point in making up excuses. He explained that those were his parents, pointing to the little boy in the picture. The thug assumed Sora was mocking him and decided to teach him a lesson. He was just about to throw a punch to show who ruled these streets. But right then, a massive truck lost control and swerved directly toward them. They were standing right in its path, but Sora did not even flinch. He physically stopped the massive vehicle, while the thug simply fainted from sheer terror. Holding the heavy truck back with just one hand, Sora asked him to repeat himself. He calmly noted that he still had not heard an answer to his question. The trembling thug quickly changed his tune, stammering how great it was to see him grown. He eagerly welcomed him back, then pointed in the direction of his parents' house. After a quick goodbye, Sora set off, while the thug bolted in the opposite direction. The guy ran for his life, desperately needing to warn his crew about this monster. Sora walked on, finding it pretty weird that a random thug knew his parents' home. He remembered that his father had always been incredibly kind to everyone. His mother was just as gentle, always filling their home with genuine love and warmth. But in a brutal world like this, good people are usually taken advantage of. Sora was absolutely sure things would be different now that he was finally back. He was not going to let a single soul hurt his family. At last he arrived at a massive house where his parents apparently lived, this young. Man had assumed the city was just full of abandoned homes left behind by evacuees. Stepping up, Sora knocked on the door and waited with a beating heart. From inside, his father's voice called out, saying that work was finished for today. The door swung open to reveal a mysterious young man with snow-white hair. There was something quite familiar about him, but the father still watched him warily. Then the stranger spoke those impossible words, "Dad, it is me, your son, Sora." A single tear rolled down Sora's cheek. His father stood there, completely frozen. He looked closely, trying to find any trace of the little boy they lost. That was 5 years ago, back during the chaotic chaos of the evacuation. Soon, a woman stepped out of the kitchen with tea, apologizing for the wait. As they sat down, she noticed her husband was still dead silent. He simply could not believe that this stranger was actually their son, Sora. After all, the white-haired boy did not look like him at all. The father decided it was time to put this stranger to the ultimate test. He looked at Sora and proposed a quick game, a father-son exchange of secrets. Even if it meant sharing embarrassing things in front of his wife, he had to. He had to expose this imposter, and if the stranger said anything suspicious, well, Roger would eliminate him right then and there. High above, Roger, the father's elite bodyguard, was hiding in the ceiling. He lay in wait, ready to strike down the uninvited guest at any moment. However, Sora immediately noticed the assassin lurking right above them. Honestly, he respected it. His father had to stay safe, and good security was key. But Sora knew this was about to get incredibly awkward for the guard. He was about to hear things about his boss he definitely should not know. With a calm smile, Sora started talking and spilled the first major secret. He revealed that his dad attended cooking classes with local housewives every single weekend. Up in the ceiling, Roger froze, utter disbelief. He pictured his brutal boss wearing an apron, holding a knife and a tomato. That was definitely way too much information, but Sora was not done yet. Next, he mentioned that his father also took secret ballet classes every week. Absolute shocker, things were getting quite wild here. The father cleared his throat, claiming anyone could have somehow dug up those silly rumors. Sora just chuckled and offered to share even deeper family secrets to prove it. He warned his dad not to get too upset with what came next. Sora then turned, pointed directly at the sword, and dropped another truth bomb. That prized blade hanging on the wall is nothing but a cheap replica. The father gasped in sheer shock, demanding to know if he had actual proof. Sora stood up, grabbed the sword, and explained there should be a bite mark. It was on the hilt left behind by his brother. The bodyguard was stunned. That mark was actually left by the boss back when his hands were bound. He had held the sword with his teeth and slaughtered 38 men that day. Still, Roger was not convinced. He figured the stranger was just incredibly clever. Surely he was just trying to lower their guard before striking them down. But then, right before their eyes, Sora slowly began to draw the blade. He takes the sword, presses it against his bare hand, and slowly slides the blade. It bends back and forth, folding like a cheap plastic toy. Suddenly, the man rushes forward to embrace the boy, pulling his chatty son close to his chest, believing he had died years ago. Tears stream from the father's eyes, utterly overjoyed because he was so incredibly happy to see his boy after all these years. The father recounts how they searched every single inch of land for their missing son before the father even had time to realize it. He had become the boss of this entire territory, yet here he was, shedding tears in front of everyone like a complete emotional wreck. The man sobs on his son's shoulder and asks for his assistant to step down. The guard was shaking in his boots, knowing that a brutal punishment likely awaited him. The boss lived his life in endless bloodshed. A terrifying underworld figure. The guard had never seen anything like this before. Now his tough boss looked like a completely normal person. The bodyguard, much to his regret, had witnessed the legendary head of the family, who valued honor above all. In such a messy, emotional state, the guard realizes he needs to quietly slip out of the room. He prays he can escape before they decide to kill him, but before the guard can crawl away, Sora stops him, telling him his father wants a word. Talk about an awkward family reunion. Now they are all sitting at the same table. The atmosphere is incredibly tense, and everyone in the room is sweating bullets. The head of the family turns to the guard, pointing out that this guy has a massive mouth. Everyone knows it. Sora also looks at the terrified guard with a chill smile and warns him, if word gets out, the blame falls entirely on him. Oya is way too terrified to look his boss in the eye. He swears he will keep his mouth shut, but the pressure is coming from both sides now. It is obvious these two are definitely father and son. But then, the lady steps into the conversation. She gently asks her boys to stop scaring the poor guard. Oya is extremely grateful to Mrs. Mukajima, though she still sweetly warns him that he needs to stay quiet if he values his life. The father is finally starting to calm down and regain his composure, relieved that his son did not expose his embarrassing sleeping habits to the guard. Watching his parents bicker, Sora finally feels a warm sense of home. A sharp contrast to the cold abyss he came from. But before anyone can relax, the front door bursts wide open and a hostile gang rushes inside, leading them is that punk from earlier who gave away the boss's home address. He has brought a swarm of thugs to hunt down the blonde kid who was looking for the boss. Sora casually turns around, making it clear that he is the one they wanted. The punk recognizes him instantly, declaring that while this lone stranger might be tough, he stands zero chance against a whole gang ready to tear him apart. The thugs assume this blonde kid is some assassin sent by the rival Tiger Roar Guild, who broke into the mansion on purpose to make a move against their boss. Sora casually catches the thug's weapon with a flick of his wrist before the man can smash anything, politely asking his father to introduce them all. Mr. Mukajima tells his shocked men that this young blonde man is his son, Sora, who went missing 5 years ago and has finally come back home. He wants to explain what rank his son actually holds now, but suddenly realizes he has absolutely no clue about his current power level. He only hopes his boy can keep up. To everyone's absolute shock, Sora reveals he does not even have a system. This is unheard of. How did this guy survive inside the brutal fallen zones for 5 whole years? Everyone knows that without a system, getting stronger is a dead end. No matter how hard you train, breaking past the 10th level is mathematically impossible. The other hunters are starting to lose their patience. Why did their friend drag them here? He hyped up this stranger as some kind of monster, but look at him. He is just a systemless newbie. The redhead stammers, trying to defend his own eyes. Maybe he made a mistake, but that power felt incredibly real when they first met. Deep down, the redhead knows he is not crazy. No ordinary beginner survives what he saw. No newbie survives getting hit by a massive truck without a scratch. Sensing the redhead's sheer confusion, Sora offers to let him check his actual level. The redhead is completely baffled. What is this guy even planning? But then a realization hits him. If someone lacks the system entirely, they are blind. They have zero access to basic data. Normal hunters use their systems constantly. It is how they read monster levels and gauge their survival chances in battle. He warns him that measuring someone else is actually a restricted skill. Without a highly specific system appraisal ability, Sora's level will remain a complete mystery. Mr. Mukajima nods in agreement. The appraisal skill is exceedingly rare among standard hunters. So Sora turns directly to his father, asking him to analyze his level instead. He genuinely wants to know how he measures up to today's power rankings. Plus, he desperately needs more intelligence regarding the secrets of the abyss. But his father flatly refuses the request. Frustrated, Sora looks to his mother next. She gently shakes her head. Having her son back home is more than enough for her. To her, he is simply her beloved boy, safe and sound at her side. Eventually, his father relents to the constant begging and activates his appraisal system. The screen stays blank, no matter how many times his father initiates the scan. Absolutely nothing shows up. The screen remains completely blank. Now there are only 2 logical explanations for a glitch like this. Either Sora truly has no system, or his power level is utterly incomprehensible. So high that his own father's system is locked out from viewing it. All the system displays is his registered name, Sora Mukajima, and nothing else. If he were a weak beginner, surviving 5 years in the abyss is impossible. Only one conclusion remains: Sora is simply too powerful to measure. Talk about an insane twist. Mrs. Mukajima quickly steps in to calm her family down. She insists they should simply celebrate his return instead of digging into his past. It is completely obvious to her that Sora has grown into a strong, honorable man. She knows in her heart that he endured hell to make it back to them. Hearing this, Sora's emotional defenses crumble as a rush of memories floods his mind. Dark flashbacks of his past flash before him, times when he fought like a merciless monster. Tears well up in his eyes. Mr. Mukajima quickly notices the heavy, weeping atmosphere. He can see that everyone is on the verge of breaking down, including himself. He quickly starts ushering the visiting young hunters directly out of the house. This family reunion needs privacy, but before closing the door on them entirely, Mr. Mukajima asks about Gyro. 2 hours have passed since they left. Still no sign of them. Finally left alone, Sora speaks up. Sora eagerly asks his mother if there is any news about his older brother. He feared the absolute worst. Luckily, his brother was doing just fine. The brother is currently serving in the military, completely safe and healthy. His mother pulls out her phone. The picture shows a handsome, confident man. He has been fighting on the front lines, desperate to avenge his sibling. Sora has not seen him in years. He was always his protector. After remembering childhood, Sora asks about his mother's current position in the guild. She gladly confirms that she holds high status and a wonderful reputation. In truth, this remarkable woman has risen to become a highly respected head priestess. Her divine healing abilities allow her to support allies and make prophecies. With her foresight, Sora wonders if she can see right through him. As a priestess, she must be able to read his very soul. She explains she cannot read stats, but recognized her own son instantly. Her visions had always promised her that her beloved boy would eventually return. She always kept that hope alive. Later that night, a sudden knock startles everyone. A cautious guard cracks open the heavy door, asking who is outside. A loud voice orders him to open up immediately for their leader. It is a massive, towering man sporting a distinct cross-shaped scar on his forehead. Mr. Mukajima is in fantastic spirits as he steps inside to greet Gyro. He welcomes Gyro back, but immediately notices his deputy's very grim expression. Wanting to know what went wrong, the guild leader asks for a report. He had sent Gyro to investigate the situation and now wants the details. He wants to know exactly what kind of suspicious activity they managed to uncover. Gyro explains that, just as feared, the rival Tiger's Roar Guild made a move. They have aligned with the military, delivering defeated monster remains to them as usual. However, a corrupt inspector with a laptop started heavily nitpicking during evaluation. He claimed the monster corpses were far too damaged to accept. Using cheap excuses, he only rewarded half points while pocketing the rest himself. He secretly reported the full value to superiors, redirecting the massive profit elsewhere. Every single stolen point went straight into the pockets of the Tiger's Roar Guild. The Union Guild leader is absolutely furious upon hearing this blatant robbery. They are supposed to be neutral, yet they are pulling dirty stunts. This corruption will only escalate. Staying passive is no longer an option. Letting themselves be humiliated like this would doom the entire city's future. The chief thanks Gyro for his hard work, telling him to rest and eat. Mukajima plans to personally visit the Tiger's Roar Guild to settle this dispute tonight. It is high time to show them that they cannot just walk all over us. The Union Guild is definitely not some weak, naive pushover they can exploit. Sora is not in the room, but his senses are now incredibly sharp. Thanks to the dark shard embedded in his chest, he can easily eavesdrop. He hears every single detail and realizes that their enemies have joined forces. The Tiger's Roar Guild has allied with the thug Kagawa and his goons. Now his father is walking right into danger to negotiate with these criminals. Feeling deeply concerned for his newly found dad, Sora takes immediate action. He throws the doors wide open, stepping forward to announce he is going along. Father, the red-haired fighter, grinned, thrilled that Sora wanted to get involved. This meant he could finally witness his raw power. Meanwhile, the guild leader introduced his son to his assistant, explaining Sora went missing 5 years ago. Deep within the fallen zone and just recently came back, Gyro wanted to know what level the kid had reached after surviving so long in that wasteland. But the answer shocked him. Sora was living completely off the grid. He seemed like a regular guy, and in these shelters, that is a death sentence. Without system assists, you would not survive 3 days in the wild. Sure, elite physical stats and solid survival instincts might buy you time, but lacking real class skills makes you a complete liability. You would become dead weight. Naturally, Gyro did not trust him. He offered a polite smile, but suggested the returned traveler rest up at home. He was probably exhausted from the journey and needed to stay safe inside. Mr. Mojima was also unsure of his son's capabilities, so he agreed. He ordered Sora to remain with his mother. Sensing the tension, she stepped in. She quickly offered to give her son a tour of the entire property. Sora did not mind. Honestly, this reaction was entirely expected. To active system users, he simply looked like a fragile, ordinary human. They saw no use for him in combat. Besides, he still needed answers. Monsters were targeting him. He had to figure out why. Hiding his true power was the best way to protect them. Wouldn't you do the same? So Sora calmly went along with his father's decision without any protest. The redhead pouted, disappointed he would not see the chief's son fight. But there was no time to complain as the group mobilized for battle. Left behind in the quiet house, his mother gently urged him not to be upset. His father was just terrified of losing the son he had finally found. They had only just reunited after 5 long, painful years apart. No parent would willingly throw their child back into a war zone. She urged him to trust his father. He was incredibly strong. Her divination cards promised that her husband would return completely safe. Foresight, Sora realized his mother possessed some kind of predictive skill. But if the hostile Tigers' Roar Guild had actually allied with the military, his father's guild would face heavy pressure. He needed to learn more. He wanted to know why this rival faction was targeting his family. His mother sat him down and explained the grim details. Following Judgment Day, the awakened hunters partnered with the army. They ruled the shelters, but his father built the Union Guild. He cooperated with the military, holding this territory to wait for Sora. Over those years, the Union Guild expanded into a massive force. Driven by the hope of finding lost loved ones, they keep the peace. They secure resources and fight beasts while the army raids the towers. But their leader was soft-hearted and refused to send his men to die. He protected his people, keeping this refuge peaceful for 4 years. But a few months ago, a massive threat arrived from the 4th shelter. They call themselves the Tigers' Roar Guild, and they want complete control. To establish a branch, since that day, guild warfare has been non-stop. No intervention, the military completely refuses to step in. Monsters evolve, the army is desperately failing to hold them. But then the brutal Tigers' Roar Guild volunteered to clear the towers. Their influence exploded. Now, even the army depends on their sheer strength. Honestly, precious tower raid intel is just too valuable to ignore. Even wilder, they have an awakened chosen by the deity itself. His name is SR, and make no mistake, he is their ultimate weapon. Sora hung onto every word, desperately wondering what this deity actually was. His mother explained that Tower Lords hold absolute, godlike power. They are basically gods to humans, and if you survive their trial, you are reborn as an Isar, wielding terrifying divine power. Outside the walls, they are worshipped as literal living gods. Right now, the Tigers' Roar Guild boasts the most ESRs. Since each ESR possesses absurd power, they are swallowing up rivals. Meanwhile, the locals absolutely love his father's guild, but there's a catch. They have never cleared a single tower, and they completely lack an ESR. Sora knew things were incredibly grim, but hope wasn't lost yet. Still, a major question lingered in his mind about his father's beloved Union Guild. If the people love them so much, why do they act like mobsters? His mother caught him off guard, admitting she simply liked bad boys. Sora was totally speechless, but his mother laughed, saying everyone was happy. With a smile, she gently ushered her son toward the bathroom. She told him to wash up, teasing that she would rub his back. Finally alone, Sora shut the door and immediately activated his senses. He carefully swept the entire house, searching for any hidden threats. He confirmed his mother was asleep and wouldn't disturb him, but wait. The young man had no idea that a massive storm was already brewing. Sora worried deeply for his father, staring out the open window. The next moment he leaped out, secretly trailing his father into the night. Silence from the dark hallway, his mother watched him slip away. She wanted him to rest, but he was always a stubbornly rebellious kid. Right then, his father's crew marched straight toward the enemy guild. Sora scaled a nearby building, quickly scanning the dark city streets from above. A single brightly lit building stood out, making his search effortless. He quickly spotted his father's group, but suddenly, a wave of intense dizziness hit. This was bizarre. Ever since the abyss fragment entered his body, he never got sick. He had never even sneezed, but then that same chilling voice echoed again. It hissed directly into his mind, swearing to destroy the seed of the abyss. Sora froze. He knew exactly who was speaking, the Lord of Shadows. The Shadow Lord was masking its presence perfectly, leaving Sora completely blind. He couldn't feel it at all, yet the danger was undeniably close. The beast had infiltrated their territory, and he had to remain on guard. But in the next instant, another heavy wave of vertigo slammed him. Total darkness, the entire world began to spin out of control. Spinning like a top, the Shadow Lord's cold voice declared he wouldn't let the seed of the abyss escape. It was simply because Sora's soul had been permanently marked by that horror. Suddenly, right beside him, Sora could clearly see and sense the terrifying Lord of Shadows. He struck out at the monster immediately, but his hand passed through nothing but an empty illusion. Still, it kept whispering that it wouldn't let him escape. All of this because the young man's soul carried the dark brand of the abyss. The entity repeated those same words in a sickening loop. Then, a blinding beam of light flashed over him. A voice ordered him to get off the roof immediately for shouting. So loudly, just like that, Sora noticed the illusion instantly vanished. Into thin air, he quickly ran off to avoid the military patrol. After putting some distance between them, the exhausted young man stopped and saw it again. The shadow had returned. That's when a vital realization hit him. That phantom had vanished because of the bright light. This could be his weapon. He'd have to test that theory later. For now, Sora finally slipped back onto the busy public streets. Standing under a bright street lamp, he checked his pulse. Finally, the pattern made perfect sense if he stayed in the dark. For more than 7 seconds, the dark mark would instantly activate and trigger absolute, mind-bending dizziness. The moment he lost his composure, the dark text of the abyss would flood his vision. Right after that, the grotesque face of the Shadow Lord would emerge and start muttering those same mind-numbing words over and over again. It was highly irritating, and the worst part, only Sora could see it. To everyone else walking by, he was just a good-looking guy talking to himself. But Sora was beginning to piece this together. Stepping directly into the light caused a sudden, agonizingly sharp ringing to pierce straight through his skull. Slowly, the high-pitched noise faded, the brand vanished, and the monster disappeared. He'd never dealt with this back at his parents' house, which was always bright. Now he knew the chilling truth. The Lord of Shadows could stalk him anywhere, launching psychological attacks to break his fragile mind. The entity could even launch a sudden, real strike at any second. One sudden ambush could end it all. He couldn't let his guard down. First things first, he absolutely had to locate his father and provide any necessary physical backup. Sora moved through the dimly lit streets, muttering to keep his focus. To any onlooker, he looked like someone who had completely lost his mind. But as the streets emptied out, he finally had some quiet space. At last, he could analyze his family's increasingly dangerous situation. His mother warned that the military no longer needed the Union Guild. This meant their leader, Mr. Mukijima, was in serious danger. Sora had no clue how many powerful fighters guarded the hideout, but the army wasn't acting alone. Their alliance with the Tiger's Roar Guild was about to make a move. A brutal attempt to crush the Union Guild in one swift strike was highly likely. He would protect his parents, even if it meant turning the streets bloody. Quiet, peaceful days were gone forever, a bitter realization he had to accept. Up ahead, a massive crowd of people began to gather in the dark. This was definitely the spot. Sora quickly slipped into the shadows, watching silently. He didn't want to cause a scene in front of his father's men. He stayed on high alert, ready to leap into the fight at any second. Right now, observing was key. He wanted to see his father negotiate, since violence is always a last resort. That was the exact lesson his father had drilled into him from a young age. And now Sora wanted to see if the old man would actually practice what he preached. But then the crowd erupted, roaring with excitement because the real show was finally starting. It had been a long, long time since their big boss had actually drawn his sword. Word of mouth said his last fight left a scar nearly 20 meters long on his opponent. At this moment, the guild leader looked incredibly imposing, his presence filling the air. His gaze burned with fury, and his entire body radiated an overwhelming, crushing power. He unsheathed his blade and swung it overhead. Sora watched, his eyes wide and jaw dropped. He completely forgot to stay hidden, because a massive hole now ran straight through the building. The destruction spanned the entire height of the massive structure. Sora turned to a nearby guild member. He asked the guy if their boss had always possessed this kind of mind-blowing strength. The man proudly replied that their leader always charges into battle without hesitation. Talk about a plot twist. His father had always preached that violence was the absolute last resort. Right then, the kid realized that parents tell some pretty massive lies to their children. You know, the usual stuff like Santa Claus or Father Frost. The man nodded. He confirmed that, at first, the boss really was completely against using brute force. Back then, he actually believed the military would handle all the problems. But things changed. The military does not care about small skirmishes anymore. If hunters keep working and civilians are not starving, they will not break up fights. So the fastest way to resolve any issue these days is with your bare fists. If you cannot back it up in a fight, you might as well keep your mouth shut. Punch first, talk later. Honestly, that is the only motto that works here. Sora always assumed that the truly strong hid their massive power away like silent monks. But now he sees that when you have real power, you can run completely wild. Perhaps that is why the monk kept his eyes closed, to avoid losing control and rampaging. Meanwhile, he stood on a nearby rooftop, quietly observing the scene from high above. He looked down at the aftermath left by Sora, who wiped out every remaining monster. Those beasts had survived the initial bombing. Yukio Shunji slowly unwrapped his face bandage. He activated his keen eye, looking down at the slain level 90 monster. The beast looked completely shredded to pieces, yet there were zero signs of heavy weapons. This discovery genuinely frightened Yukio. Earth held way too many monsters in human form. Because of this, he decided to proceed with extreme caution. Tied his blindfold back on. Meanwhile, Mukujima sheathed his sword, waiting for them. Suddenly, a hostile group of thugs marched right out of the damaged building. Their leader warned them not to get cocky. Things had changed in this shelter. It was not the safe haven it used to be, Mukujima quietly agreed. A lot had changed, mostly because too many annoying pests had crawled inside. People who had absolutely no right to seek safety here. He regretted his mercy. He should have wiped out the Tiger Roar Guild when he had the chance. The thugs sneered, claiming the leader was probably just too terrified to pull the trigger. Well, now he had a golden opportunity to prove those words with actions. Mukujima burned with rage at the insults, refusing to let it slide. He warned the thug that he would end him right here and now. He was not about to let him walk away, slowly drawing his sharp blade. Seeing this, the instigator started to panic. He had pushed the powerful master too far. Where on earth was his backup, had he not provoked the leader enough? To keep the act going, he kept throwing insults, calling the guildmaster a coward. He claimed the leader was too scared to fight, saying he was nothing more than tiger food. That was the final straw. Mr. Mukujima suddenly snapped, gripping his hilt tightly. He unleashed his weapon, charging straight at the loudmouthed fool with blinding speed. Suddenly, a ghostly woman boasting angelic wings materialized right behind the target. She slammed a massive shield forward, blocking Mr. Mukujima's heavy strike effortlessly. The Demaze group was thrilled. Their plan worked, and they had successfully triggered him. Right on cue, the high-ranking military officer stepped out of the nearby building. He immediately accused Mr. Mukujima of starting a brawl inside the safe zone. Doing so was strictly illegal. Nobody expected Mr. Yuzui to show up here. Was the military actually backing the Tiger Roar Guild? Sora watched the scene unfold. Sora instantly put the pieces together. This corrupt officer was working with their rivals. Looking around the area, Sora began scanning the quiet, dark windows of the structure. It seemed completely empty, but he sensed numerous presences hiding in the shadows. Dozens of eyes were watching them. This entire ambush had been carefully planned. The corrupt military being present here at this exact hour was absolutely no coincidence. It was a setup. Mr. Mukajima instantly recognized the officer. It was Yuzui, the man who handled shelter intake. The corrupt soldier spoke up. He declared that under Article 15 of the Shelter Security Law, fighting was banned. Breaking this rule meant 15 days of hard time, or perhaps something far worse. Severe offenses could even lead to execution, and the stakes were suddenly sky high. Yuzui smirked, asking if the guildmaster was going to comply with the law. The pieces clicked. Mr. Mukajima realized the deadly trap they had laid out. They baited him into attacking so they could use legal authority to ruin him. See how smug they look. Officer Yuzui was completely unafraid of any consequences. He clearly had major backing from above, allowing him to act with total impunity. If they locked Mukajima away, they would make sure he never walked out. His sentence would be extended forever, or he would simply disappear in the night. A quiet, unexplained death. Mr. Mukajima saw the whole plot. Without him leading the Union Guild, their ruthless rivals would take over everything instantly. Still, why was the military risking so much to upset the delicate balance? There had to be a deeper power struggle going on behind closed doors. He knew he could not take the bait. He must not admit guilt. Forcing a calm smile, he told Mr. Yuzui that absolutely no duel had taken place. As a proud guild leader, he refused to give them any easy victory. But the smug officer pointed directly to the massive slash on the wall. The fresh sword mark cut deep into the concrete. It was undeniable proof. Mr. Mukajima did not deny making the crack, but remained perfectly cool. A damaged wall did not prove a duel. He had simply been venting. Just relieving some stress on a decaying structure. This annoyed the officer. Officer Yuzui descended the steps, realizing this clever leader might outsmart him. He could not let himself look like a fool. He glared coldly. In this tense situation, Mukajima had no say. Yuzui made the calls. If Yuzui claimed that everything pointed to a duel, that was it. There was no arguing. Mukajima had lost the moment he stepped foot here. Right then, dozens of armed soldiers swarmed the building's windows. They aimed weapons down at the guild. Luckily, Mukajima was sharp. He knew caution was required. Meanwhile, his hot-headed ally urged immediate combat. He begged his master to strike right away, but Mukajima hesitated. He ordered his hot-headed fighter to stand down since they were exposed. He absolutely refused to risk civilian lives. Instead, he quietly calculated his next move. He knew that a direct clash with Yuzui would be absolute suicide. However, if they took a Tiger Roar elite as a hostage, they could easily escape. Tsuchida quickly sensed the massive power surging nearby. He instantly activated his shield. He refused to be the vulnerable target. But this defender's mechanical skills were far from ordinary. Unlike basic tanks, he could scan and dissect incoming strikes. Mukajima was completely unfazed. Even from here, he could strike. That specialized defense, the Milky Shield, was designed solely against swords. Yet its physical defense level was light years ahead of regular gear. Tsuchida was entirely confident he could tank any master-level strike. He smirked from behind his spiked barrier, completely secure in his position. He laughed outright, fully convinced Mukajima would never break this defense. It seemed completely impenetrable. Yuzui, the cold officer, finally spoke up. He gave him a cold choice: surrender peacefully now or face jail. Either he goes alone, or they drag his entire guild down with him. Gyro and the rest of the crew watched on, completely filled with anxiety. Wait, did he really just sheath his sword? Mukajima calmly gave up. He unfastened his weapon belt and handed it over. It was his only play. Surrendering was the smart move. Still, his own guild was deeply conflicted. Some thought he was just putting on a useless show of power. But the clever ones realized he surrendered to protect his people. Gyro watched silently. He knew the truth behind this sudden capitulation. They had a secret code. raising his sword meant get ready. And lowering the blade, that was their signal to strike with full force. The others had no clue, they were oblivious to this private channel. It was a silent connection. Now Jiro was fully locked in. He watched like a hawk, the exact moment Mukajima released his weapon. The blade vanished. Instantly, Mukajima lunged directly toward Tsuchida. He slipped past the guard, aiming to fight with bare hands. The target counted on his shield's anti-sword magic to save him. He believed he was safe, standing face to face with his opponent. Mukajima summoned his blade. Tsuchida flashed a greasy, smug grin. He believed that even a top-tier guildmaster couldn't scratch his defense. You knew a counter was coming, and Jiro thrusts his hand forward. He targeted Tsuchida, triggering his active skill. Instantly, the sword strike connected, completely shattering the unbreakable shield Tsuchida was. He had just enough time to notice his opponent was weirdly holding a hammer. Instead of a sword, everything happened in a flash as the soldier Yuzui drew a dagger. He claimed Mukajima wanted to kill him personally, so he was only defending himself. Jiro unleashed his skill at the soldier, instantly blocking his attack, and now the man was completely helpless with his blade. Meanwhile, Suchu felt entirely paralyzed. He screamed to his men that the Union Guild had gone completely mad and needed to be taken down. The soldiers opened fire, but Jiro easily maintained his defensive skill, keeping the barrier strong. Master Mukajima thought that as long as they could keep things controlled and hold off the enemies, they could escape, because the tide was definitely turning against them. The Union Guild was losing this fight. The leader stepped forward, ready to crush the enemy, when suddenly a blur whipped past him at crazy speed. And he could not even make out what it was. Yuzui smiled, thoroughly pleased. He noted that the stone wall Jiro created had cast a perfect shadow, making it incredibly useful for a fight, but the truth was he had already spotted the leftover light magic lingering on Suchu's shield. Because of this, the conditions for his special assassin skill, Shadow Trans, were fully met, and now the rogue Yuzui was able to yank Suchu right to him, and without a hostage, the guild master had zero chance of winning. Yuzui smugly told him to surrender immediately. Mukajima gasped in pure shock. He stood there, unable to believe his eyes. Every single soldier and low-rank member stood there with their mouths wide open, staring in complete disbelief. They desperately wanted their commander to explain what was happening. Yuzui could not comprehend what had left everyone so stunned. But then he suddenly felt a heavy hand drop right onto his shoulder. It was impossible to tell how someone had gotten behind him so fast, but Sora was now standing right between the two villains, gripping their shoulders and asking what they were so shocked about. Yuzui went rigid, desperately trying to figure out who this stranger was and how they had snuck up on an assassin entirely unnoticed. Was this man backup for Mukajima? The soldier had no clue who this guy was, but he was definitely an enemy. In this game, whoever strikes first wins. So he decided to take full advantage of the chaos and quietly started pulling a tiny bottle containing a mysterious potion out of his pocket. Suchu caught the movement, instantly recognizing the deadly poison his guild, Tiger Roar, had brewed to kill a level 90 boss. It was a mystery when the rogue had stolen it. Yuzui tossed the toxic vial into the air, slashing it wide open with a quick swipe of his dagger, so the deadly mist would cover the entire area. Suchu desperately tried not to breathe, realizing this madman was going to take everyone down with him. Meanwhile, the ordinary soldiers stood like mindless sheep, staring at the rising mist as it spread around them, breathing it in deeply without a single clue. Suchu knew this was a total stalemate. Things had turned incredibly grim. But at least Mukajima's mysterious ally was surely dead by now. Or so he thought. Suddenly, a massive grip clamped onto the two villains by their necks, holding them in place and refusing to let them escape the very center of the toxic cloud. Sora, however, felt absolutely great. He clamped down hard, catching both daggers in his teeth. The thugs froze, realizing they were dealing with a straight-up monster. This guy was completely immune to the poison meant to kill monsters. He locked his grip on them, completely shutting down their escape. See, player stats change based on their specialization. Things like strength, dexterity, and of course, constitution. Shaking off a deadly toxin like that means a massive constitution stat. We are talking level 100 tier, such as stared in absolute horror. He never expected to find such a defender at the leader's side. Sora calmly tells them to lay down their weapons and retreat. Instead of obeying, a massive brawl breaks out between the men. Yuzui sees his shot, leaping onto Sora's shoulder to lock his arm. He prepares to snap the bone, but Sora does not even flinch. With a sudden burst of power, Sora slams both of them down. Giving them zero room to recover, he stands completely dominant. Mr. Mukajima watches in absolute delight as the thugs go flying. Both thugs crash heavily into the solid stone wall behind them. The massive impact sends a heavy shockwave pulsing out like an explosion. And it was all just his young boy effortlessly throwing those thugs off. Yuzui admits this kid is tough, but wonders how he will handle Shadow Trance. In a flash, the soldier slips right behind Sora with his blade ready. He drives the dagger straight toward the young man's back. Suddenly, his own hand freezes up, forcing him to push with muscle. He shoves with everything he has, but nothing happens. Sora's back feels like solid steel. The knife cannot pierce it. It is like stabbing solid rock. Sora just lets his opponent struggle there. Then he slowly turns and delivers a devastating blow to the chest. Yuzui's mind goes blank. This makes absolutely no sense to him. The kid shattered his ribs right through a heavy bulletproof vest. Time to run, he thinks, but Sora already has him by the face. He gets slammed directly into the concrete floor with absolute bone-crushing force. His nose completely explodes in a spray of red as he goes limp. Once he confirms his opponent is out cold, Sora calmly stands back up. He looks around, then drags Yuzui by the collar like trash. Sora marches over and throws their broken leader right at their feet. The remaining grunts have enough brain cells to not fight back. Then he turns and tells his father to let his men handle cleanup. They need to head home because Mom is waiting for them. Back at the estate, the atmosphere is dead quiet and tense. Mom is incredibly relieved to see her family walk through the door. She asks if everything went okay, and he happily nods. The guild boss tries to dig up more details from the guards. But the men stay completely tight-lipped about what they saw. It does not matter anyway, since the Union Guild knows their location now. They must prepare for the worst, but first they need a plan. The master brushed off Tiger's roar entirely. His mind was elsewhere. Instead, the master turned to face his son. He needed to know exactly what had been happening with Sora during those 5 long years of separation. Sora quietly admitted that once he finally understood the situation. Between the guilds, his own actions over the past few years finally made sense. 5 years ago, the young boy had been violently snatched away and transported to a strange reality. And the entire time there, he had been forced to slay monsters. It was a tower dungeon, and Sora spilled the entire truth. He detailed every brutal moment inside that tower dungeon, sharing his deepest fears with his family. How he killed his first goblin, got a sharp shard lodged in his chest, and fought through every floor. Yet Sora confessed there was still so much he could not explain. The sudden summons back to Earth made absolutely no sense. His father sat in tense silence, deeply contemplating every single unbelievable detail of his son's tale. 16 towers existed, but none matched this description, leaving Jiro with more questions than answers. If a hidden tower sat near their hideout, they had to act. Clearing it out was their absolute top priority, but as a parent, his emotions were overwhelming. He was just profoundly grateful his son was still breathing. But Sora had done far more than just survive. returning to them as an incredibly powerful warrior. In fact, his son was now many times stronger than all of them. But family was what mattered most, and they would protect him. They would never let anyone tear their family apart ever again. Sora silently stared at his parents' heavily scarred hands, making a solemn vow in his heart. He would never leave them again and would protect them. Suddenly, without warning, the shelter plunged into absolute darkness as the power completely cut out. This never happened in the shelter. Jiro quickly tried to reassure them. Jiro muttered about the local forecast, trying to blame a sudden thunderstorm for the sudden blackout. But Sora knew better. The air in the room turned freezing cold. He felt the Lord of Shadows creeping through the dark for him. Suddenly, a familiar voice hissed directly in his ear, warning that escape was impossible this time. Sora braced himself, but something about this voice was completely different. And here is the weirdest thing about this sudden, creepy moment. Neither of his parents saw a single thing, despite their own fully awakened sensory abilities. But then the Shadow Lord froze, looking intensely surprised by something. His dark silhouette began to waver, gradually fading from sight. Sora stared in absolute shock, wondering if this cursed connection had finally broken for good. No, the Shadow Lord was simply physically detaching himself from his body. A towering, cloaked stranger stood fully manifested beside him, mockingly greeting the seed of the abyss. His shadow companion clearly wanted to be treated as separate. But without a physical body, it was still just an illusion. Suddenly, the cloaked stranger lined toward him, chillingly close, whispering directly into his ear that there was absolutely no reason to play pretend anymore. Do not think of me as an illusion, you only deceive yourself. The Shadow Lord suddenly reached out, completely covering Sora's eyes. Cold hands pressed tightly over his face, mockingly asking if he still believed this was fake. Sora saw nothing but absolute darkness. This nightmare was truly real. Gyro stared at the boy in sheer shock, completely lost on what was happening. Sora was wrapped in a strange dark energy, which was literally pouring right from his body. Mr. Mukajima panicked, completely unable to understand what was happening. To his son's eyes, his mother immediately stepped in, using her healing techniques to start the purification process. Still, she sensed that her son was not actually cursed, yet she still could not find any explanation for this. Sora realized that this time, the Shadow Lord had created a physical manifestation of himself. This meant everyone was now in serious danger. Even though Sora was blind, he could see his opponent and rushed to attack. He lunged forward. The Shadow Lord, despite being grabbed tightly by the throat, kept mocking the young man, asking him if he was actually afraid of death. Sora's parents watched in absolute terror. They could clearly see their son fighting an invisible enemy. Seriously, even his mother, a legendary seer, saw nothing. Sora kept choking his opponent, demanding to know why this cowardly bastard was still chasing him, but the Shadow Lord laughed, saying Sora had it all wrong. In fact, the dark entity had not even introduced himself to the boy yet. He revealed his true identity, Fidel, the god of darkness from the noble divine race of Sora, once absorbed the black crystal. The divine power of their people left in the abyss. Simply put, Sora absorbed the very power of darkness that belonged to Fidel. Now, his minions are keeping a close watch because the boy escaped the abyss on his own. Those deadly servants are already closing in, and if Sora wants to survive, he must return to the tower with Fidel. Sora held his grip, realizing these minions were probably the Ezra his mother had warned him about. His father could not stand by anymore. He had no clue what was happening. But he drew his sword, ready to strike. However, his wife stopped him, telling him to wait and watch. Meanwhile, Sora kept talking to Fidel, mocking him that the gods clearly were not having an easy time either. Squeezing the god's throat even tighter, the young man demanded to know what a few weak Ezra could possibly do to him. Fidel warned him not to get cocky just because he got lucky in their last fight. The other Ezra were on a completely different level, and Fidel himself had blinded Sora without even breaking a sweat. Sora demanded to know why he should believe any of this, calling it a cheap bluff. Fidel laughed. Sure, the kid did not have to believe him. But once this entire room was drenched in blood, regret would mean nothing. Sora knew better than to trust this monster, but he could not deny. The warning might be true, but wait, a sudden glow changes everything. Fidel instantly tensed up as the light grew brighter and brighter. The dark god began screaming and gasping for air, writhing as if he had been dropped onto a blazing hot grill. Suddenly, Sora realized. His vision was fully restored, watching his opponent dissolve in the holy light. Mr. Mukijima let out a huge sigh of relief when he saw Mr. Shuani standing right there, arriving just in the nick of time. Standing in the doorway was indeed none other than the legendary monk. Sora met them right by the refuge entrance, and his father was incredibly pleased. He said this monk, Yukio, was a dear friend rather than a mere acquaintance. Together they had founded this guild. With Fidel still there, he turned to the monk. He ordered Shunji to release him instantly. Sora stared in shock. Could the monk actually see Fidel? Yukio opened a single eye, announcing they had urgent business to discuss. The guildmaster demanded answers, but the monk promised to explain it all just as soon as he had a private word with the guildmaster's son. Eventually, the room cleared, leaving Sora to ask what had happened and why. This talk was so critical. The monk admitted that he was no Ezra, but his eyes were specially gifted to perceive divine power. This was because Yukio had mastered a forbidden art to seal away the god of darkness. Though the divine energy Sora wields shares that exact same dark nature, the sheer might of the dark god completely eclipses any regular deity. Yukio had no clue how this power chose the boy, but they had zero time to solve that mystery. Since immensely powerful entities were already converging on the city, they were undoubtedly lured by the supreme power Sora now holds, and nothing could stop them. There was no stopping them. The monk honestly had no idea what happened between the young boy and the dark deity, but Fidel's warnings were absolute truth. However, Sora must never return to the abyss, since the tower's dwellers are way more terrifying than these Ezras. They want nothing more than to trick him and lure him back inside to steal away his divine power. The safest option is to leave this refuge behind and enlist in the military. Sora asked if he was seriously referring to the group that tried to blow him up. Yukio simply chuckled, explaining that while the military was indeed a mixed bag, there were still highly reliable allies inside, and the Ezra wouldn't dare harm the young man once he officially enlisted. Sora wanted to make sure his sudden departure would truly guarantee his family's safety. The monk confirmed that this was indeed the case, since the Ezra obeyed unspoken rules and did not meddle in the lives of ordinary citizens without a valid reason. On top of that, the Ezra wouldn't dare act rashly with the monk around. After all, his strength easily rivaled theirs. Meanwhile, the members of the Tiger Roar Guild were furious over their failed, idiotic mission. The target lacked a system, and yet they'd lost 4 elite Ezras. Reports showed that Saku Mukajima's son went missing years ago, likely dragged away by one of those mysterious towers. Be pulled inside, an Ezra named Sherry believed a single comrade would easily crush the master's son. Ramu, much like her arrogant comrades, also thought this target was nothing special and required no real effort to eliminate. However, their boss unexpectedly announced he would personally lead this particular hunt. The news stunned the Ezra, who never expected their chief to step in. But the leader revealed that this direct command had come straight from Zeus. This annoying Sora Mukijima had to be eliminated immediately. Meanwhile, the tower near shelter number 6 was right on the verge of activating. They all knew how crucial it was to seize total control. The stubborn Union Guild had rejected Tiger Roar's proposal, planning an independent investigation of the spire. Now, the Ezra's true goal is far more than. They targeted Sora Mukajima, but also wanted to destroy his parents, the guild founders, in one shot. They wanted to wipe everyone out in a single strike, so the monk warned Sora's parents. He explained everything and urged the boy to head directly to the command center right away. He wanted him to meet Ms. Tanasaki, a woman Yukio trusted to protect the boy. She would keep Sora safe and prevent anyone else from exploiting his massive power. First, they had to inspect the active cursing formation before a battle began. If a fight erupted, even the Tiger Roar Guild would be useless under its influence. Miss Mukajima told her son not to worry, as their guild sat here for a reason. A few minutes later, the monk sat in the street to meditate, fully focused. You know things are about to get wild when even Yukio looks this serious. Right on cue, dark energy filled the courtyard. The main gate swung wide, and 4 terrifying ESR warriors stepped through the entrance. The monk immediately deployed his golden bell barrier to hold back the advancing threat. But the enemy forces were simply too overwhelming, with over 100 marching in. Every single one of these fighters shared the exact same deadly objective tonight. Even the experienced monk felt a chill seeing just how many soldiers had arrived. Then the crowd parted as their supreme boss slowly walked into the open yard. Rish Mukai had arrived in person, walking forward with total, absolute confidence. Mukai ordered one of his warriors to strike, and Sherry instantly stepped up to attack. He focused his power as the Union Guild members watched in utter confusion. They had no idea what was happening, but the leader felt a cold pressure. It felt like a dark force brushing against his face. The monk knew it was bad. The entire Union Guild, including the security squad, was surrounded by a dark presence. They were completely trapped inside, with absolutely no way to escape this nightmare. The intruders scanned everyone with cold, predatory eyes. And with that, it became painfully clear that the defenders were hopelessly outmatched. The monk stood tall, demanding to know their business. The enemy quickly realized that their main target, Sora Mukajima, was not present. Where is he? They demanded to know, but the monk stayed completely calm. He told them to watch their mouths, calling them out for their terrible manners. He even offered to teach them a lesson. Meanwhile, Miss Mukajima acted quickly. She quietly began to activate a powerful protective barrier around them. She hoped it would shield her family before the enemy could make a move. Suddenly, a crippling curse spread over the invaders like a heavy, suffocating fog. The enemy warriors received a system warning, which only fueled their intense rage. Hiro was highly annoyed, but he still believed he could easily wipe them all out. He lunged forward, but Monk Yukio caught the attacking warrior's fist barehanded. He stopped the strike cold, completely shocking the arrogant attacker with his strength. The monk sternly warned them to stop underestimating the Union Guild. And check this out, Hiro is completely stunned when he looks at his stats. His level had plummeted by 30 full points, leaving him incredibly vulnerable. The once confident fighter had nothing left to defend himself after losing his levels. Yukio immediately went on the offensive, sending Hiro flying across the entire courtyard. Anyone caught in the range of this curse lost half of their power. Simply put, their levels had dropped by 34 points, shifting the entire battle. They had to consider if they were ready to fight in this state. Rich Muka was absolutely thrilled. He thought this made everything way more interesting since lately all their battles had been pointless due to the massive gap in levels. Finally, they had a real chance to prove themselves, and Ryuma stepped in, activating her powerful abilities, as Rich Mukai declared that as long as everyone here was in his hands, Sora would crawl to him on his knees. The thought amused him greatly. Suddenly, the space in the courtyard began to twitch and blur, and unfortunately, nobody from the Union Guild could stop this bizarre process. In the very next moment, they all found themselves inside the arena of Athena. Rich Mukai was highly pleased, saying he hadn't enjoyed a fair fight in a long time. The sheer thrill excited him, and he hoped he wouldn't get bored before. Sora joined them. The the guild members couldn't figure out where their boss. His wife and his closest allies had gone, but rich Mukai had already drawn his weapon, declaring he would personally eliminate all the annoying obstacles. Remaining in the courtyard, meanwhile, the soldiers continued to search the city streets where monsters might appear, gradually eliminating them one by one. Suddenly, something caught their attention. Approaching them at an insane speed, moments later, the young man landed near Miss Tanasaki, leaving all the startled soldiers gaping at the stranger. Sora double-checked his photo of Miss Tanasaki to make sure he had found the exact woman monk Yukio had recommended to him. After that, the young man raised his hands, announcing he was from the Union Guild and required immediate military protection. Miss Tanasaki ordered her soldiers to lower their weapons, realizing that Sora Mukijima was standing before her, and said she had a few questions for him. Meanwhile, in the arena of Athena, Sora's closest companions had absolutely no idea what to expect from these unfolding events. Soon, flames ignited across the columns, signaling that the arena was ready for battle. Riama turned toward the great gods, calling on them to witness her fight. She then begged the gods to grant her miraculous divine power to help her in battle. And then, high above all the Ezra, the giant silhouette of a goddess appeared, spreading her arms to protect all the Ezra. Riama announced the rules. Each side must choose 5 representatives, and the first team to score 3 victories will receive the blessing of Olympus. The losers will be incinerated by divine light and scattered to the winds. Hiro grinned, already sensing his victory. Mr. Mukijima asked what it meant to find 5 representatives. When only 8 of them were present, Riama confirmed that was indeed the case. But here is the twist. The main star of the show, the one everyone had gathered here to see, was still on his way and didn't even know he was even supposed to show up here. Wanting no further delay, Hiro stepped forward, demanding to know who among them was first in line to face death. With that, Hiro's challenge to his rivals was officially issued, and by the rules they had to respond. Monk Yukio was incredibly upset, believing his own superficial thinking was the reason they had all ended up in this terrible mess. Saku quickly tried to calm his worried friend. This mess was not the monk's fault. Besides, they were all stuck in this together. Lady Yu's curse drained their levels, leaving a brief window for one-on-one fights. Jiro pointed out that since Lady Yu was too weak to fight, they had to win. The remaining 3 had to handle things, and the monk knew the stakes were insanely high. Ares had their strongest ESR. After becoming an ESR, he single-handedly crushed a guild of 3 rival ESR fighters. But Yukio told his worried friends to stay completely calm, having a plan in mind. He wanted to test a brand new strategy, volunteering to go first in this dangerous duel. To prove his tactics, the monk Yukio Shuonji stepped directly into the arena. He accepted the challenge, and the goddess raised her hand. She ordered the combatants to prepare themselves for the immediate start of this battle. The second she gave the signal to begin, Hiro immediately lunged forward at his opponent. He targeted the monk, who was still standing completely calm. Hiro absolutely despised talkative priests, thrusting his hand forward to shut him up. Everyone watched the intense clash with bated breath. The two matched each other blow for blow, making it impossible to predict a winner. Yukio focused entirely on dodging, making Hiro think he was just fleeing. He assumed the monk was running for his life, but Yukio was only waiting. Suddenly, the monk snatched Hiro's arm, locking it in an absolute vice grip to freeze him. This stopped him. Shirai noticed their ally was pulling back. He had easily closed the gap before, but now he was desperately backing away from him. This fight was much harder than expected, but Ramu still believed in him. She knew Hiro was strong. Meanwhile, Mr. Mukijima quickly checked on his bleeding, injured companion. The monk did not answer, but his right hand was already dripping dark blood. Fresh blood dripped onto the stone floor, and Hiro grinned with absolute, twisted pleasure. He pointed to the sharp fangs of Cadmus protruding from his hand. Those deadly fangs had easily pierced deep into the monk. Yukio knew Cadmus was Ares' legendary beast, but never expected this. He never thought the beast would possess the host's body. But now Hiro stopped hiding his monster, unleashing its terrifying and deadly power right here. Sharp spines of the Cadmus serpent sprouted all over his ESR body. Hiro declared his hungry serpent wanted more, immediately lunging forward again. He closed the gap instantly. Fortunately, the monk barely managed to dodge his deadly strike. Yukio sidestepped in a split second, feeling the spiked hand graze right past his nose. But things got worse. The Cadmus snake moved on its own. It partially emerged from Hiro's body, striking forward to bite Yukio. Desperate, the monk quickly conjured his golden bell barrier to somehow block the strike. The golden shield barely slowed down those fangs, ripping into his flesh. Yukio leaped backward, tearing his hands away from its deadly jaws. He was safe for now, but a far worse, legendary nightmare was waiting for him. The lethal Cadmus venom quickly spread, causing his stats to plummet instantly. The poisoning was absolute torture, and honestly, you can feel Hiro's smugness. He praised the monk's surprising durability, thrilled that this fight was actually getting fun now. Even worse, Hiro's health fully restored from the siphoned blood. Now Hiro realized the monk was completely out of options and ready to break. Yukio had reached his limit, and the guild master knew it too. If this battle kept dragging on, the gap in power would widen, making it unclear whether Yukio could even survive. Hiro was already charging back in, refusing to give his opponent a moment to recover, thanks to the monk's slowed reactions from the poison. Hiro easily landed his next strike. He rained down heavy blows, forcing the monk to guard with his bare hands, while everyone wondered how long he could stand. Yukio gritted his teeth and began whispering a sacred prayer because he had no other option. Hiro loved every second, mocking that no god could save the monk now. Watching closely, Rimu noticed her companion starting to glow with strange divine energy. It made no sense since the monk was not an Ezram. Where was this power coming from? The guild master watched in pure awe, thrilled that his comrade found a way through this desperate situation. Now it was clear this intense match was still wide open. And the monk kept whispering holy prayers, bowing deeply before the grand divine image of the Buddha. Soon, the legendary 100-verse Vajra mantra echoed and began fighting in the monk's place. Hiro sneered that he did not care about any god, warning the monk that this pathetic trick would never stop him. But Yukio was already overflowing with a divine power that grew stronger and more intense by the second. Hiro scoffed at him, calling the monk a complete idiot for trying to protect himself with armor made of holy power. He surely respected his opponent's sheer determination, but was that really his entire plan to win? Hiro had taken countless lives already and had fought all kinds of warriors, even some pretty bizarre ones. They always thought a holy shield could block the deadly snake's fangs, clueless to the fact that divine energy was a resource sweeter than. Now Hiro was absolutely certain he would consume the monk alongside his holy energy, just like he did to another holy man. In the past, finally, the two opponents rushed toward each other as the battle reached its final, brutal stage. Shockingly to everyone watching, Hiro took a hard hit to the face. The monk then sent him flying with a massive punch straight to the jaw. Hiro had no idea what just happened. The monk had somehow neutralized the deadly poison, regaining his speed with holy power. Yukio had absolutely no intention of stopping, continuing his assault by landing several more heavy blows. It was clear that not only his speed, but his strength and sharp reflexes had dramatically improved. Every single stat was boosted, but the lethal snake was still ready to defend its master, and now this monk was the absolute perfect prey. Hiro turned to his opponent, telling him that they had fought enough and he should simply let the beast devour him. Hiro watched as his serpent swallowed the sacred energy, trying to feed on it. Now that holy strength would become part of Hiro. Suddenly, a massive force slammed into the Ezra's back, leaving him unable to understand what was happening. Hiro felt that he had completely lost control of the divine power, which now flooded his entire body and was slowly consuming his physical form. Monk Yukio turned to his opponent and said, it seemed Hiro had started celebrating his victory way too early, but in reality, carrying this burden was incredibly tough, especially since it refused to obey him, and another absolutely devastating blow caught Hiro right in the face. Ezra could not believe his ears, especially hearing the monk's claims that this divine power was too overwhelming for the Kadma's serpent to handle. Still, the monk smiled, looking at his opponent, asking where on earth Hiro got the idea this was divine power. Just a few more brutal strikes, and the naive fool was flying across the arena. Lady Yu finally understood why many years ago the monk had actually wanted to be reclassified as an Arhat. Hiro staggered up from the ground, feeling that he barely had enough divine power left to even maintain his snake form, since the situation had reached such a desperate dead end. He had to take a massive risk and go entirely all or nothing. Suddenly, the snake that was hidden inside Ezra's body exploded violently, scattering flesh into pieces in every direction. A deadly poison erupted from the blast, filling the entire arena, posing an incredibly severe threat to the monk. Gyro quickly realized that the war drums had started beating, and the guild master could not believe his eyes. What was happening? Talk about a desperate move. Hiro turned to the god Lord Ares, offering the blood of the venomous snake as a sacred sacrifice. In return, his beloved disciple begged the god Ares to grant him a divine spear. Sure enough, in the very next moment, a devastating spear materialized in Hiro's grip, and he swore to fight until his body completely decayed. Rema grew deeply alarmed upon seeing this legendary divine weapon. Even an ESR could not wield such power without offering the god a worthy sacrifice, and even then only temporarily. This divine weapon carries the deity's raw power, adapting perfectly to the active ESR. Sherry had warned that this was the ultimate, completely insurmountable gap between a normal player and an ESR. Now, it seemed this duel was completely over for the monk Shuani, but Remu knew Hiro had sacrificed the very poison blood of the snake that Ares himself had originally gifted him. If the gods discover this deception, they will be absolutely furious. Fortunately, Ares is merciful and might forgive Hiro if he wins. But in the case of defeat, the consequences are too terrifying to even imagine. Remu refused to believe in failure, hoping that an ESR wielding a divine weapon could never lose to a mere player. Can he actually pull it off? The monk noted. Horror that his relentless opponent was closing the distance again, staring intently at Hiro. He could not fathom where that deadly spear had suddenly vanished to. Yukio assumed he just could not see the weapon and tried to dodge, but a devastating explosion still shattered the air right behind him. The monk realized he got lucky, barely avoiding the blast thanks to a timely mantra. Though he took some damage, he desperately prayed the spear was not venomous like that snake. Soon it was clear the spear possessed a highly destructive effect, stripping away half of his armor's defenses, and the enemy quickly struck. Again, on top of brutal close combat, he was also firing deadly arrows from his back. The monk realized his opponent was not just launching spears from his hands but could sprout them from anywhere on his body. The strike speed was absolutely insane. Hiro was clearly loving this powerful state and wanted to see how the monk would deal with this massive onslaught. Yukio was not even. He stopped trying to analyze the moves, just hoping to dodge these unreadable attacks. Predicting their path was impossible, and every missed blow only drained him further. Hiro was still an absolute beast, even after taking that massive backlash of karmic damage. Yukio knew it. Without that curse weakening Hiro, he would be dead already. He had to back away, keeping his distance was his only shot. That extra space would give him a split second to dodge the next strike. Chanting the holy mantra once more, the monk prepared to summon a divine sign. He wanted to purify all the domains so that strife and sin would completely vanish. Hiro just sneered, watching his opponent desperately try to create some distance. But the monk wasn't fleeing, he was activating the Silent Sutra. Instantly, a sacred, blinding light manifested directly over the arrogant warrior. This holy sutra had the power to cleanse and banish corrupt forces. It immediately started neutralizing the toxic snake blood inside Hiro's veins. Hiro realized the monk was trying to use distance to trap him. Honestly, Hiro knew these tactics were nothing more than naive dreams. Mr. Mukijima suddenly screamed out, warning his monk friend to watch his back. Another lethal attack rained down, and Yukio barely managed to slip away in time. Spears shredded his hat. The goddess overseeing the duel glared down in pure fury. She locked her eyes on Mr. Mukijima, completely outraged. Interfering in an active arena duel is forbidden, no hints allowed. Without warning, she unleashed her divine fire straight at the rulebreaker. Just like that, the guildmaster was completely engulfed in blazing, holy fire. Lady Yu quickly cast high-level healing magic to snuff out the blaze. Though the fire vanished quickly, it had severely drained his life force. This was bad, really bad. Hiro looked back at his rival with a smirk. He taunted the monk, saying he would be dead already without that outside help. But no matter, he could easily land another devastating blow. Besides, the rulebreaker getting punished only made things easier for everyone else. Monk Yukio knew close combat was way too risky now. His opponent still had those long-range blood harpoons ready to fire. With his remaining strength, the monk could only last 3 minutes at most. Even so, he had to fight to the absolute bitter end. There was no other choice. Hiro wanted this over with. He was entirely sick of this match. He gathered his power for a final critical strike, completely sure of his victory. A massive wave of attacks flew toward Yukio, who desperately called upon the Dharmas. He sought to unite them, as these sacred eyes are divided into strict ranks. We are talking about the heavenly eye, the wise eye, the Dharma eye, and the Buddha eye. If the wise eye couldn't win this, he would force the Dharma eye open. This powerful eye drastically accelerates his perception. But that massive speed boost only lasts for a brief moment, requiring a swift, decisive breakthrough. Yukio noticed that Hiro's divine spear didn't actually pack that much spiritual energy. Bracing for the impact, the monk gathered every bit of his strength. He caught the divine spear with his bare hands. Hiro gasped in shock. He pressed down on the weapon with both hands, but it didn't budge. And just like that, the monk knew exactly how the attack would unfold. Smiling, the monk declared that he finally grasped the essence of those incoming bloody spears. His opponent kept thrusting them, but the secret turned out to be surprisingly simple. Sherry stared in utter disbelief. How did this humble monk manage to block them? Those razor-sharp threads of blood were stopped cold. Ramu watched the monk closely, realizing his eyes could see right through the complex blood technique. Seeing this, the guild leader and his deputy finally felt a glimmer of hope. This fight was far from over. Their companion had pulled off the absolute impossible. He actually countered the Esru of Ares himself. Meanwhile, Yukio analyzed the dark energy. The sheer malice built up inside his enemy was spawning truly wicked thoughts. To cleanse this darkness, the monk began chanting a powerful, sacred, purifying mantra. Instantly, Yukio felt the dark blood begin to yield under his divine presence. Under his holy influence, the blood submitted without offering a single ounce of resistance. But Ramu knew this power was unpredictable, far from being a straightforward match. The flow was incredibly subtle, carrying a hidden threat beneath the surface. It could pierce through defenses when the defender least expected it to strike. Sure enough, while the monk was busy purifying, he felt a sudden shift. The venomous fluid was secretly pooling all around him, preparing for a strike. He was totally trapped as deadly crimson needles locked onto him from every angle. To counter this, the monk unleashed his Dharma eye to analyze the trap. He acted quickly before it triggered, chanting holy sutras to wash the threat away. The sacred words completely cleansed Ezra's blood, stripping away his offensive power entirely. Still, Yukio kept praying as those crimson arrows continued their relentless flight. He warned that those lost in darkness and blind passion would surely fall. They would find only endless suffering. Right then, Ramu decided to step in. She warned her ally that Hiro's relentless assaults were completely useless now. The monk could read every single flow of divine energy. This left Jira furious. The goddess Athena watched closely, but only gave Ramu a simple warning instead of punishment. However, Mr. Mukajima held his partner back, insisting they should not interfere. Better to wait and watch Yukio Shuani claim his final victory. Holy energy heavily weighed down on Hiro, making it almost impossible to stand. He stood there fuming, absolutely lost without those crucial hints from his companion. Suddenly, a massive sacred avatar loomed behind the monk while his chanting continued. Hiro slowly lost all physical control as the overwhelming holy light purified him. It utterly shattered his inner darkness, urging him to seek absolute spiritual peace. The sacred verse promised to overcome all trials and quiet the suffering souls. This was the very first prayer every novice learned, but it was far from weak. In fact, the raw strength of the wrathful guardian deity was completely doubled. Both offense and defense surged, though this peak state lasted only 30 seconds. Within this short window, absolute concentration was required without a single distraction. The monk had to maintain his chant directly in front of his foe. It was a brutal, humiliating sight, yet, despite his bleeding wounds, Hiro desperately tore open his own shoulders with his bare hands, unleashing blood. He flung the crimson spray straight at the monk, aiming to disrupt his focus. He needed to break the chant at any cost, but Yukio remained unfazed. His sacred technique could suppress the serpent blood, rendering the attack entirely useless. To smash through this defense required a staggering amount of raw, holy power. But in reality, this desperate, sudden attack meant absolutely nothing to the Dharma. It would not even scratch the monk. Still, Hiro kept tearing at himself, unleashing a deluge of his own blood, weaponizing it directly against his opponent. He kept slashing relentlessly, and it was clear Hiro had lost all rational control. The man was a mindless beast, driven only by an insatiable hunger for victory. Meanwhile, Yukio could barely stand. The monk had pushed past his ultimate limit. Blood poured from his eyes, but he refused to falter. Hiro grew incredibly furious, realizing he lacked the strength to break the monk's absolute concentration. Suddenly, a massive, towering guardian deity manifested directly over the battleground. As Hiro knelt helplessly, the final countdown of the holy prayer began to echo. It felt like ice burning in oil, like water rising through wood. Suddenly, everything converged inside Yukio's mind like a supreme lord. The divine strike was ready, and it crashed heavily upon the defeated warrior. Hiro had no way to resist this ultimate godlike might, fortunately. Yukio realized he had finished the fight just before the Dharma's eye faded. The presiding goddess instantly announced that the first victory goes to Union Guild. Yukio Shuanji had officially won the match, but the boy was completely exhausted. He stood battered with blood streaming down his face, yet victory was secured. Ramu immediately rushed over to cast high-level healing spells on her friend. Though physically mended, Hiro could only sit on the cold floor, speechless. Even after being physically healed, Hiro sat in absolute silence. Suddenly, two entities appeared. They materialized directly behind him, clearly disgusted by the failure of their vessel. They stared down at Hiro, sickened that he had lost in Athena's arena. These cruel deities had absolutely no intention of listening to his pathetic excuses. A grim message was delivered directly from their father, who was deeply disappointed. Because of his failure, they were ordered to execute his punishment immediately. Hiro stood powerless as the terrible rods of retribution were summoned. The sword of Damocles descended upon the Ezra, who was utterly defenseless. Watching this brutal punishment, Saki Mukijima was shocked by their heartless cruelty. He realized these gods showed zero mercy to their own subordinates. With a final cold farewell, the deities declared this their father's ultimate mercy. They vanished instantly. Back on the bench, the team rushed to congratulate Yukio. He had defended his guild's pride with absolute dignity during that brutal battle. Nearby, Hiro muttered that he would definitely kill the monk next time. But Shariah stepped forward and coldly reminded him there would be no tomorrow. Instead, Shariah would take the stage to burn every single opponent to ash. He swore to burn everyone alive in the all-consuming fires of Ada. Saki Mukijima stared at this terrifying opponent and prepared to take his turn. His wife handed him a small protective pouch before he stepped up. She warned him that Shariah was a grim reaper who controlled spirits. Saki thanked his wife and tucked the charm safely inside his inventory. Knowing it would be vital, the courageous leader finally stepped out. Shariah stood waiting in the center, wielding a massive, imposing scythe. Drawing on his seasoned samurai training, Saki projected his blade's intense protective aura. But charging up takes precious time. Still, in a direct duel, speed is everything. Getting up close is the only answer. First, you have to close that gap. With one lightning-fast step, then unleash a relentless barrage before they can even react. Next, find a crack in their defense, that one glaring weakness. Then deliver the final, devastating blow. Sure, it is a basic strategy. But when executed right, it is deadlier than anything else. Right then, the goddess Athena calls out, signaling both fighters to prepare. She declares the duel officially started, and Sharia instantly summons his horde. Vengeful spirits swarm, but the samurai decides to slip right through them. Using sheer speed while analyzing their every pattern, in a flash, Sakui is suddenly right behind Sharia, sword raised to strike. Yet Sharia remains confident in his protective barrier. Sakui slices forward, tearing through his target, only to realize it is a mere illusion. No physical body falls. Instead, in the blink of an eye, countless howling spirits surround Sakui from every direction. He swings his blade with blinding, unnatural speed, carving right through the spectral horde. Breaking free from their icy grip, he stands directly before his foe. Another heavy slash cleaves Sharia cleanly in two for everyone to see. The physical body divides, but this straightforward approach is useless. How do you cut down an opponent with no real physical form? Mukijima acts as if he does not hear a single word. He just keeps splitting Sharia's form repeatedly. Sharia just laughs, mocking the useless effort. This is completely pointless, he sneers. You should just surrender now. Sharia boasts about the endless ocean of spirits under his command. The samurai can never truly reach him, let alone defeat them all. After all, a swordsman who cannot see his real target is helpless. Sakui readies himself, preparing to unleash another powerful strike. But Sharia closes the gap instantly, whispering a chilling warning. No time to charge that blade with energy, he warns, but Sakui swings, relentlessly keeping the aggressive specters at bay through pure reflex. Ramu watches intently. To her, this looks less like an even duel, and more like a mortal struggling against a god. Hiro thinks Sakui simply got lucky with an easy matchup, but Ramu knows better than that. Leading a major guild as a samurai requires unbelievable strength and resolve. Meanwhile, Mrs. Yu quietly observes her husband's life-or-death battle, showing absolutely no signs of worry or fear on her face. Ramu catches on to this strange calm. For a wife watching her husband face deadly peril, she is far too relaxed. They must have a secret play. Once more, Sakui shreds the demonic forces, turning the battlefield to dust. His concentration remains absolute. Despite the chaos, he is untouched. For now, he remains completely unharmed, but Sharia unleashes another wave. The relentless spirits surge forward, giving the swordsman zero room to breathe. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the samurai executes an incredible eightfold leap. Scattering the spectral army in his wake, in an instant he is positioned right behind his shocked opponent, back when the sixth refuge first opened. They joined forces, hunting for monster nests near the sixth refuge, where they uncovered a mine. Monsters crawled out non-stop. Later it became their first research base. At first, the beasts were small and weak. Progress was easy, even basic soldiers handled them without trouble, but gradually they ventured deeper, exploring the dark tunnels and confronting new beasts along the way. Suddenly, the situation completely changed. The mine housed totally different, terrifying breeds of monsters. Their numbers were endless. High-ranking threats emerged, forcing the human fighters to combine their unique skills. They had to survive. Inside the depths lay an entire ecosystem of monsters, a hidden breeding ground where they bred, lived, and evolved. Deep inside the mine, a spider ruled from its massive, toxic web, a level 80 bloodthirsty nightmare. At that time, it was easily the most terrifying beast. Besides, humanity back then lacked any skills or weapons to stand against such a monster. Their only choice was to run. But Sakui Mukajima stepped up, drawing the monster's attention. He charged straight at the spider, letting the others escape the mine. Everyone watched the brave samurai, blade drawn, rush the giant beast. No one knew his fate. Talk about a brutal sacrifice. 3 days passed. Then a desperate, dying shriek from the spider echoed through the cavern. The onlookers held their breath, suddenly answering the death cry. The entire cavern began to cave in, right before their eyes. Massive boulders crashed down, sealing the cave entrance from within. But at the absolute last second, launching off the falling rocks, Sakui Mukajima leaped free. He was alive, untouched, sword still in hand. To survive, he had used a legendary technique, the eightfold leap. Now that same power flashed out against Ezra Sheri. The samurai slashed through his target, but it was no physical body, only a vengeful spirit. This terrifying technique granted him unmatched agility, letting him execute 8 consecutive leaps, each strike exponentially faster. But so far, it had not decided the match. Sakui had already used this method 3 times. To evade the spirits, in a flash, he activated the skill once more. Ezra Sheri was stunned as his opponent accelerated with blinding speed. On the 5th leap, the samurai closed the distance, driving his blade straight down on him. Yet, Sakui had to slash through phantom barriers repeatedly. Every swing drew on the raw strength inherited from a legendary hero, and with the area clear of spirits, his speed was a decisive edge. To strike his foe down before more phantoms could form, everything went according to his exact plan. He calculated that by using extreme speed to outrun his opponent, Ezra simply wouldn't have time to summon more phantoms, forcing a direct duel, and in a physical sword fight, the samurai was absolutely confident in his ultimate victory. Gripping his hilt, he channeled the hero's ultimate legacy. Watching this, Ramu finally understood why he had ruled as the guild leader for so long, even without being an ashram. His terrifying combat power easily rivaled their elite forces. Meanwhile, various legends circulated about the origin of the tower, the most famous claiming that the